All right, again, welcome to Craig. You can cut the beginning part of that recording off. Are we allowed to say? So next week is an interview with this gentleman up here whose name is Mr. X. In case he doesn't want it on the recording, I'll just say Mr. X. You guys can all look and see who it is. How he graduated college, stopped renting, and built a rental real estate empire. Interview. James, are you going to do that interview?
Yes, I'll be interviewing.
Perfect. How's that gonna be?
It's gonna be amazing.
I figured.
Yes, really loose definition of empire.
Empire is anything over one house, right? See? Look how happy all of you are. You're all like, I didn't know I had an empire. I went to class tonight. I have an empire.
Next week, you're being interviewed. I think we have all the classes for the rest of the year.
We're done for the rest of the year. Thanks for coming to class. The week after that, James, I will be gone. Otherwise, James probably would have made me teach. He's going to be explaining rent to own to tenant buyers. I still haven't looked to see if I have that presentation for you to steal. I'm fairly sure I do. But what's that going to be about other than amazing?
So we've covered pretty much every part of the lease option rent to own process if people want to do that investing strategy, except for one. And the one that we have not covered, we haven't covered like how to talk to the tenant buyer and explain what the program is on the telephone. And so, we've covered how to unravel a deal, how to analyze the deal, how to structure the deal, how to do partners for the deal. But this is the one piece I think we're missing. And so this class on Wednesday, August 15th will be a two-part class. The first part of the class is I'm going to explain to you a little bit about talking to tenant buyers and things like that. And then about halfway through, I'm going to transition. You guys will all magically become tenant buyers. And I will present to you as if you were interested in the lease option rent-to-own program, as if you were tenant buyers, and I will try to do it in such a way that it's generic enough that you could reuse the recording of the second half to basically give it to your tenant buyers and have them understand the basics of the program. So it's sort of like a done-for-you program. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is talking to tenant buyers is by far, in my opinion, the most time-intensive part of this entire process. If you have to get 100 calls from potential tenant buyers in order to find one that you're able to actually buy the property, put them in there, and have them do a rent-to-own from you, then this is the part that takes up the most time. And so I'm going to try to save that time for you by giving you a recording that you could use and leverage to do the services.
I'll give you my email or my presentation if I have it too. You can use it or not. And then the following week, there is another interview. It is bankrupt, homeless, and living in his car to 1 million plus in real estate. Anything you want to say about that other than show up?
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. And then we'll be at the end of August, which is crazy that it's already August, and then we'll be at the end of August in 4 weeks. The best decision-making tool for evaluating real estate investments, which is, you'll get a little glimpse into that tonight, but not very much. It's essentially the lessons from a professional poker player on how to make bets and how you can apply that to your real estate investing career in a way that can help make you much more successful and may make you take bets that you otherwise would be like, well, I think that is a 40% chance of failing, so I'm just not going to do it. You may think differently after this class.
And I'll reframe that by saying, when you're talking about real estate investing, they're investment opportunities. They're kind of investments you're making instead of bets. And if you kind of reframe that, so.
Yeah, and so in poker, you're really making investment opportunities, right? There's a pot of money in the middle of the table, and you are making an investment to try and win that pot of money, much like you are in real estate.
That's actually a better way to look at it, probably.
Yeah. So that's what that class will be about. This is the first time this class will ever have been taught, as is the case for actually all of August, including tonight. So it's a great brand new month, I guess, thinking about it. Introductions. Introduce yourself, and then since it's my story tonight, which is a little weird that I'm introducing my own story, at least for now, what's something that you would like to see me talk about tonight? I mean, I have lots of stuff to talk about. I could probably keep you here till midnight easily, but we won't do that. That might help you in your investing career. And if you don't have anything, that's totally fine. James, you have the mic, so why don't you start us off? And you don't need to ask a question because you get to ask questions all night.
I'm James Orr, so that's about all I have to say about that.
I didn't need any facetious, crazy questions to start off with. So, nice shirt.
I'm Royce Quintana. I'm a long-term buy and hold investor here in Northern Colorado. I've talked to Brian about a lot of this, but I guess I'd like to see what your mindset was and how you went from maybe, doing just a few rentals and what the transition was to actually scaling.
Cool. Don't watch me write, just introduce yourself.
I'm Mary, and I'm here to learn as much as I can.
Perfect. Nothing you want to know. No question.
I'm
Perfect.
Dan Smith, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Nice. Welcome.
I'm Kevin, and no specific question.
Excellent. We're going to be done early.
I'm James. I have a question about, I'm interested in moving to out-of-state rentals and buy and holds and doing it for monthly cash flow specifically. And I'm interested in hearing if you have any and kind of what that looks like for you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Donna, and I'd like to know, Mr. Brian, if you had mentors when you first started in real estate and what that kind of looked like.
That will definitely be in the presentation.
I'm Brandon. I want to know your why and how you stay true to that why.
Man. I didn't put that in there, but it was I had it in there, and I was like, I took it out. There's so much stuff that we can.
Hi, I'm Bob, and I'm just wondering where you got the cool shirt.
RogueFitness.com. There you go. That's where he got his too. Actually, he got his straight from me. And he finally wore it. It only took like a year and a half.
I'm Barbie, and I would like to know when you, and if you transitioned all your properties from you managing them to property manager, and where you decided to do that.
Okay.
I'm Karen, and I second Barbie's question.
Perfect.
I'm Bob. I think maybe it'd be interesting to know when you think you're done expanding your empire, and when it's just like more trouble than it's worth to do one more property or something like that.
So that's a great question, and we will definitely address that tonight and the challenge of the way to think about that.
I'm Beth, and I'm interested to hear there's so many different avenues to invest, and I think we all know that real estate is pretty awesome, but your specific reasons for choosing real estate out of all of the different ways you could have invested.
I'm Zach. I've got a couple questions for you. One is I want to know your why on why you ended up choosing real estate, and what was your why on what drove you towards, becoming more financially independent or that.
Sure.
And how you've taken throughout multiple careers, changes, and everything else, and how you used your failures and built upon those and turned those into learning experiences.
Perfect.
And
All of this
successes.
stuff's in there so far.
And then, okay.
We got those. We're good.
All right.
What else?
Have you ever gone on full rampage after losing a big poker match?
No. No.
Have you ever been tilted?
I don't think that's what he's asking. Are you talking about tilt? You talking about tilt, or are you talking about
Tilt or rampage?
like punching somebody?
Yeah. Or a bender.
I actually
Yeah.
know of a couple situations where you've been tilted. Some mice have died.
That's
Yes.
Ask him how many mice you
Yeah, so I'll give you one example because we'll leave it at there. I don't really tilt very easily, like in terms of like losing money, but there is definitely a time where when you're playing poker online and you're playing so many hands a day and you get kings and someone else has jacks, and every time the jack comes on the flop, at some point the mouse that you're holding ends up getting thrown. There's one picture, I should have put it in here. It's like the picture of the shattered mouse. The problem is I had lots of other tables still going, so the mouse was down, and I was like, crap, where's another mouse, right? And so poker players have more than one mouse in their like drawer they can pull out and just connect. But yes, a friend of mine actually had a guy come across the table and punch him in a live casino. And I've seen another guy at a table I was at pick up a stack of red chips, which are $5 chips, and it's 20 of them, and just as hard as he could huck them across the table at the guy that had won the pot. And I'm like, so you're giving him more money? Like, I don't understand. You're mad that you lost, but you just gave him another $100 and you're getting kicked out. Like, duh. So control and discipline is huge in any business.
You want to not use Microsoft Mice anymore?
Nope. They're the best.
Hi, my name is Denise, and I'm just going to sit back, soak it all in, learn from the master.
I'm going to sit back and relax.
Hi, I'm Austin, and kind of curious with all the conversations we've had over the last number of months, talking to someone that's newer, such as myself, would you recommend, once you have a few properties, still going the traditional route of kind of stacking up, going like duplex, quadplex, mentality up, or if you could skip that and just go into a multi-unit like yourself, would you rather think that's a smarter choice if able?
So would I rather, just to paraphrase, so would I rather go from duplex to fourplex to eightplex, or would I rather just go straight to a 20-unit building? Right.
Hi, I'm Michelle. My question would probably be kind of the progression of when you're investing in real estate but haven't fully moved into that arena yet. If you did, I mean, I guess you did poker stuff, but any kind of self-employment or kind of side hustle type things as a transition period before you were fully financially independent, or what that transition kind of looked like for you.
Okay.
Hello, my name's Nick. I'm going to try and get this question out and see if it makes sense. Knowing what you know now, and you had to start over now in this market, what would you do?
Oh, man.
It made sense in my head. It came out well.
Okay. Try and answer that one.
Hi, I'm Tina, and I'm going to piggyback on Nick's question. That was a good one. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime I go, oh, you're like, yeah, that's my question too. That's a good strategy.
Hi, I'm Todd, and I just came to be recorded, to be part of the presentation. So, thank you for the 5 minutes. No, I've heard some of your story, and I just wanted to come and hear the whole story. So
nice.
I'm excited to hear.
Cool. Welcome back. I haven't seen you in a while.
I'm Eric, and I'm interested to know what avenues you found to find off-market deals, and also how the market affects your strategy in real estate investing, depending on where the market is.
I'm Nick, and going off like the one thing class, what are the things in your daily routines that have made you effective?
That's a good one. I know. I know. Next week we'll be answering these questions. Gotcha.
I'm Cameron, and I'm wondering about a time you've overstretched yourself and what you learned from that.
I'm Munir, and I'm confident that tonight's presentation will be amazing.
I'm Caroline, and I want to hear your story, but I also want to know what your biggest giant challenge was starting off.
I am I'm Insurance Brian, and you know, from the front of the room, you appear totally fearless, and even in more private settings, it's a bit more of the same. And so let's pretend for a second that you had fear at one point in time. How would you overcome that fear?
That's in there.
I'm Jessica, and I'm going to go with first Nick's question, too.
Nice.
First next question.
You have multiple everyone almost, it seems like. Yeah.
I'm Diane, and I need to learn everything, so I'm open to anything you have to say tonight.
Perfect. Tammy.
I'm Tammy. I don't think there are multiple Tammys. I don't think there's ever been another Tammy here, just FYI. Yeah, and James is my husband. I will just interject if a question comes up.
Perfect.
Can I add one more thing to this list?
Yeah.
You guys both have full-time jobs doing this. Why did you decide to donate your time to this?
That's in there.
Why this?
Yeah. I'll write it down just in case I forget. But all right. And I'm Brian, and I don't need to introduce myself because you're going to hear more than you ever wanted to know about me tonight anyway.
All right, so this is kind of my part to sort of informally introduce Brian and kind of set the tone for the meeting. So we've been doing NCREG meetings since 2003, and up until pretty recently, we haven't really done any interviews. And one of the reasons why we haven't done interviews is part of the culture of NCREG and kind of and how we got here. So when I grew up, my parents told me, you know, it's kind of rude to ask somebody how much money you make, or you know how much you're worth, or you know what's this worth, or something like that. And so when we kind of started doing NCREG, you know, one of the things that you hear a lot when you kind of come to an investor meeting is people go up to people and they're like, "So how many properties do you own? How much rent are you getting on your properties?" and things like that. And so it can make people feel a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit off-putting to someone who has some assets, and they're like, "Hey, listen, I'm not really willing to share that." So as a culture, we kind of decided early on that we were not going to allow that question to kind of be asked. And so it makes it kind of awkward to have interviews where we're trying to put someone up here in front of you where they've, you know, how do you establish someone as credible? How many transactions have they done? How many properties do you own? And so one of the reasons why I was really reluctant to put Brian up here is it's clear from the classes Brian has taught. I mean, he's taught classes where he's talked about, you know, the 17-plex he's bought and that he still owns. He's talked about filling all 10 of his loan spots with single-family homes. And he's talked about buying, you know, duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, you know, at various different times, and some different strategies about refinancing a bunch of properties and things of this nature. But even I don't go and count Brian's properties. And I could. I mean, I could go and look up stuff because I have a feeling, I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling I've done a lot of transactions with you, if not 90+% of the transactions
I
you've
guess
owned.
it's like all but 2.
Okay, so
They're
all
like
but
the
2.
first
so
2.
I literally could go and look back and see exactly how much stuff, but I don't do it. And even when Brian and I talk on the phone, he'll sometimes say something to me, and I'll be like, "I don't know how many properties you have. I don't know how much you're making. I have no clue." And so I just want to set the tone for people and understand that he is by far one of the more experienced investors, and I actually was thinking about going and looking up online to see like who the top investors are in our city, and I would not be surprised if he's in the top 10, top 5. I don't know for sure.
We definitely know I'm not the top one.
We know he's not the top one because I think I met the top one guy, and we're going to try to get an interview with him. But the thought is, you know, I want to be super respectful of Brian. He's he's an awesome resource, and we're very, very fortunate to be able to have Brian teaching half the classes, or sometimes more than half the classes, depending on how many I can convince him to teach, because he's not really compensated for this. So he does not get paid to teach the classes. He does it because he likes to teach, he likes to get back, and I think he's really, really good. We're really fortunate. But I just wanted to set the tone. If you guys would just trust me, he speaks with credibility and authority up here. He has more properties than anyone I know of in the room. And so I would just tell you that he definitely is qualified to teach, and you guys should definitely listen to stuff. And as a token of our appreciation for you doing the interview, we got you a gift card, and the last gift card we got you had like $5 on it, literally. This one does not have $5 on it.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. We do appreciate you coming in and kind of teaching the classes and doing that. So thank you very much for doing it. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say, because even though I talk to you, I don't know, almost every day. In fact, there was a time when you went on vacation once, and you called me. You're like, "Hey, I felt really weird. I haven't talked to you at all today, but I wanted to just call you from Mexico to say hello." So anyway, we talk all the time, but I'm really interested to hear a bunch of stuff, and I know a little bit about what's coming, but I don't know everything. So thank you for doing that. That's for DC Oaks. That's his favorite restaurant right now. It rotates through, but I mean, it changes over time, but right now it is.
Yeah.
So
we go to the place where we don't feel bad after we eat.
That's true. That is definitely true.
We won't mention that one on recording because we'd probably get sued. So a couple slides just to kind of set the tone for a lot of you have heard me talk about what I think is personally the most important factor in my success, which is grit. And I talk to my kids about this all the time. And sometimes they amaze me, and sometimes I'm like, "Oh, come on, like you totally just, like, could you not have done like better than 10% of what you were asked to do?" But you just keep pressing. And it's really hard, right? Grit, like, it's hard to understand where it really comes from. Like, why do some people have grit? Why do some people get up in the morning and decide there's a big obstacle, I'm going to go right through it today. And other people go, not for me, right? And so I just want to define kind of a couple of the terms that we'll talk about tonight. Grit, by the definition, is strength of character. This is just straight from like the dictionary sites, right? Courage and resolve and indomitable spirit. And if you don't know what indomitable means, because I have a very small vocabulary, mostly consisting of like 4-letter words. But if you don't know what this means, because I went to look it up, because I'm like, there's indomitable, which is like the snowman, right? And I'm like,
that is not what
but that's not what that means. And basically, like in my, like these two are fairly good definitions, but when you look up indomitable, it's basically stubborn as hell, right? That's basically what indomitable means, is you are stubborn to the point where you will be successful because you are just not going to let anything get in your way. And so I actually looked at that and I went, oh, like that fits.
I've also heard it described as fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Yes. Determination, I'm sure most of you guys know this, right? Firmness of purpose, right? Or persevering towards a difficult goal in spite of those obstacles, right? What helps you get through that? Indomitable stubbornness and spirit, right? And then persistence, firm or obstinate continuance in a course of action in spite of difficulty or opposition, right? So really, when you combine those kind of 3 things, it's like, hey, it doesn't matter what's in front of me, I'm going to get over it. And that's kind of the mentality that I've always had, right? It didn't matter how serious it was or what it was, and there's definitely times where it's been like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? Like, I got to figure out a way, and then you lean on people, right? So, I don't know how many of you watched the Tour de France. Did anyone here watch the Tour de France? No one? Does anyone like bicycling? So this gentleman's name is Lawson Craddock. I'm probably saying it wrong. And he is, in the Tour de France this year, by far the definition of grit, persistence, and determination. On day 1, a water bottle, and he ate it. He fractured his collarbone, which I've never fractured my collarbone. I hope I never do, right? But that's like a very common bicycle injury, and usually it's like, you're done. And he's got like massive gash on his eye, a whole bunch of other road rash. He rode another 2,000 miles and finished, albeit in last place, in the Tour de France with those injuries across, I don't remember how many miles of cobblestone. If you've ever watched the Tour, the cobblestone is like this. Imagine what that's doing to his fracture in his collarbone, right? And he's just like, I can't give up. I came here to do this. I can't not do it. And he rode the rest of those days, 2,000 miles with those injuries. That to me is grit, right? You're just, screw it, I'm doing it, I don't care, and everything else aside. So it just ended like 2 days ago. So I thought that was an appropriate example. There's 5 characteristics of grit. Angela Duckworth has done a bunch of research. James could probably talk to this research a lot more in depth than I could. But I just wanted to kind of share what they've found in doing the research, right? The first one is courage, right? And it's hard to measure what is courage, right? Like, hey, do you have a level 7 courage? Like, are you going to upgrade to level 8? Like, what does that mean? But they found that it's really directly proportional to your level of grit. And I'm just going to read this because it's just better if I read it than try and tell you. More specifically, your ability to manage fear of failure is imperative and a predictor of success, right? This is all about overcoming those obstacles. The supremely gritty are not afraid to tank, but rather embrace it as a part of the process. So if you've ever heard anybody talk about failing that's successful, it's like, yep, I failed, I learned, I got up, I did it again, and I moved forward. So that to me is what courage really is, right? Those lessons that you get from being defeated or being set back or just on, full force failure. Conscientiousness. So this is a weird one. And again, I'm not a research scientist. Feel free to jump in. But there's kind of 2 types. There's the achievement-oriented and there's dependable. And basically what they say is the achievement-oriented individual is one who works tirelessly, tries to do a good job, and completes the task at hand, whereas the dependable person is more notably self-controlled and conventional. I'm assuming if any of you have been to class, you know I am not the latter, right? I'm not the self-controlled and conventional, right? Achievement-oriented traits predict job proficiency and educational success far better than dependability. So this is super interesting, right? The person who just works tirelessly and tries to do a good job to complete the task at hand instead of just being the dependable one ends up being in a better place with grit. So, self-controlled person who may never step out of line may fail to reach the same heights. And I think that's key. If you're not willing to step out of your comfort zone, right? If you've ever been to class and you've seen me draw, hey, this is your comfort zone and you're here and you're willing to go to here and you're like, man, I just can't step outside. But when you step outside, you just erase this circle. Your comfort zone just enlarges. And so I think that's super important in kind of what made me successful and what I think makes anyone successful, right? Continuing to take those steps that are like, oh, this is scary as hell, I'm still gonna do it, right? We're not asking you to step out here in one step, but 10 steps from now, that's where you are. Yeah, so it's important to commit to go for the gold, right? And I think if James can tell you I am one competitive person, probably.
And I think we're going to talk about that story.
Yeah, but I think that's always been my mentality is if I'm going to do something and be engaged, I want to be the best at it. I don't want to just do it and kind of have it be like something I do. I want to find out how to be the best. And so that's kind of part of my story that you'll hear about tonight.
Yeah, as an aside, while I'm thinking about this, are you going to cover not playing games that you're not willing to win at?
I think it's in that same story. Next characteristic, long-term goals and endurance and follow-through, right? So if you've come to any of the goal-setting classes, really it's about Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, right? If you're not willing to put in the 10,000 hours, it's really a process towards mastery. And mastery doesn't just happen. It happens from practice with a purpose. And once you've kind of got to where you're like, oh, I've got 10,000 hours, does that make you the best violin player in the world? Nope, you still got another 90,000 to go, right? So it's that constant thing, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. But it's long-term goals. This is where I want to be. It's the one thing class, right? This is the one thing. How do I get there? Resilience, optimism, confidence, and creativity. On the long haul to greatness, you're going to stumble, and you'll need to get back up on the proverbial horse, right? You're going to fall down. You have to get back up more than you fall down. Resilience is the powering mechanism that draws your head up, moves you forward, and helps you persevere despite whatever obstacles you face along the way. Gritty people believe everything will be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end, right? And I think that's very true. It's like, I mean, there are definitely places where I'm unable to see that in my life, but it's definitely an overwhelming concept. Go ahead and tell a story if you want. All right, excellence versus perfection. So this one really rings a bell because I know people that are, I'm definitely somewhat of a perfectionist. I like things to be done right. I like them to be done well. But the difference in excellence and perfection, right, is perfection is just taking it too far, right? Excellence is being amazing at what you're going to do. There's a quote in here I wanted to read, right? Excellence is an attitude. It's not the end product, right? It's far more forgiving, allowing and embracing failure and vulnerability on the ongoing quest for improvement. And that, to me, is key. It's not, hey, there's an end goal, right? If you think about what happiness is, right? In my opinion, people, oh, happiness is the journey. It really is. It's not, hey, someday I'm going to have $10 million and I'm going to be happy. Good luck, right? You're going to get $10 million and be like, I need 50, right, to be happy. And then you're going to get 50 and you're still not going to be happy. So doing what you love is important. So that's kind of grit. Any questions on any of those five? Angela Duckworth did not come to class tonight, so she cannot answer them.
That book is worth reading if you have not read it. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth, and definitely worth picking up. And the audio is good enough. You don't need the physical book, but it's actually good. As a side note about that, the more times you listen to stories about people that are gritty, that are resilient, that are succeeding, that have overcome failure and stuff like that, the more likely you are to actually push on. It is as if your mind psychologically tells you that it is okay to fail and get back up and keep pushing, and it is definitely worth seeking out examples to do that.
Yeah. So I will tell you, in prepping for tonight's class, this is probably the weirdest. Oh, Todd, you got a question?
I got to bring the mic back. I got to bring the mic back.
Can you write the name of that book on that board?
Sure.
Yeah, the book's name is Grit, Grit, and it's by Angela Duckworth.
Not that you'll be able to read my writing. Perfect.
Anyone could read my journal because I know it's encoded in normal handwriting.
So I will tell you, I've taught, I don't know how many classes, a lot of classes for many years here. And tonight's class is definitely the most odd class for me to prep for. And I called James a bunch of times and I'm like, so how do we do this? Because it's kind of odd. So tonight's goals for the class are really talk about my life experiences as they relate to grit, passion, determination, and try to highlight for you what I believe are similar threads of those things throughout my life and why they enabled my success. And then kind of especially as it relates to real estate investing, hopefully you'll get some motivation from this. As James just mentioned, listening to these stories hopefully motivates you and makes you more excited, whether it's about real estate investing or something else. It doesn't matter to me. That's the goal of tonight. It's not a goal of mine to stand up here and tell you, hey, I was really awesome at this. That's not my intent.
But you were really awesome at it, though.
And for in total transparency, right? There are many cases where because of my personality, it may come across that way. So I'm just stating for fact that is not my intent. That's just my personality. Hopefully, I will get to make you laugh at least once. You can laugh at me. That's totally fine. You can laugh with me. It doesn't matter. And hopefully, I'll answer all of these questions, and we'll be here till 9. And so I basically have a slide kind of for each kind of segment, slide or two for each segment of my life. And I'm not sure if James is going to ask me questions or if I'm going to kind of just tell you stories and James is going to interject.
Yeah, I think I'll set the tone and you can kind of highlight some different points. So I think a lot of folks coming in here think, did he start with, $5 million in net worth? Did his parents give him that money? Did you come from significant wealth? Did your parents have a ton of rental property? So, can you give us a little background about like what the story was earlier?
Sure. And a lot of this you may feel uncomfortable. I do not. I've spent my time in therapy dealing with it. But my parents were divorced when I was about 2.5. And my mom was fantastic. One lived in Iowa, one lived in Colorado. I was born here. My mom was the always ever encouraging, great job, very loving mom. My dad was about the exact opposite, as far to the spectrum as you could possibly imagine. And it was really difficult, right? He was just, you would get all A's and 1 B, and the discussion was about why did you get a B, right? There was never the proud thing that you wanted from your dad. And he was a realtor, and he served the Aurora and Denver metro area for 40 years. Lots of first-time home buyers. Right? So if he would have sat down and had a class, maybe he would have come up with Nomad and modeled it. But he's deceased now. And I cleaned out his file cabinets of all his real estate deals, and there were mounds and mounds and mounds of them, right? And he was very successful, but not very fatherly, I guess is the easiest way to say it. So I would spend my school year with my mom and my summer with my dad, which all my friends are, of course, in Iowa, and none of them are in Colorado. And so it's a very, how long until I get to go back, right? And so there's a lot of grit in getting through that year after year after year after year and knowing, hey, I'm going to a place that is just going to suck for 3 months, right? And so I think that, for me, is really when I look back and I go, why do I have so much grit? It's because of that. So, in a sense, I have him to thank for that. It didn't have to be that way, but that is really the core of when I look back, I go, yeah, I remember counting the seconds until I could go home, right? So, and in college, this led, and this is the conclusion of the story years later, right? I was sick for about 9 months in college. No one could tell me what was wrong. Upper GI, lower GI, everything you could do to investigate why is Brian unable to basically get out of bed, has pain in his chest. No one could figure it out. Until one doctor was like, oh, we think you're depressed. And I just laughed at him. I was like, I'm the happiest kid you know. There's no way. And so it turns out I went to therapy, and I went to 2 different people, and the first person was a therapist, and the second person was a basically drug dealer. If you've ever been to the 2, right, I think she was a psychiatrist. Hopefully there's no psychiatrists in the room, but apologize if there are. But the psychiatrist listened to my story for 10 minutes and handed me 3 things of drugs and was like, start taking these, and I threw them in the trash on the way out the door because my grit was, that's not what I want to do. I want to figure out a way to get through this without taking drugs, right? I want to figure out what's actually wrong and deal with it. So 2 years with a great therapist, pain is gone, and life is much better. And it's not, like I said, you guys might be like, whoa, this is really heavy to start class.
Yeah, in case you guys missed the lesson there, and I'll kind of draw it out. I think one of the things is instead of like wanting to just cover up problems, you were really like, I want to solve this problem. I want to attack it and come to a resolution. So if you're afraid to learn about something, or you're afraid to invest or whatever it is, and you're kind of like distracting yourself by watching TV or doing something else that you know is not getting you there, that's not you.
Yep.
You definitely go after things that you're interested in, even when there's problems, and even when it doesn't look pleasant.
Yep.
So that's something that'd be kind of interesting.
Yep. And then, I mean, there's all sorts of things. So I will tell you, until very recently, I would not have considered myself an entrepreneur. And then I started looking back, and I was like, well, when I was like 10, my mom asked me to wax her car, so I washed it and I waxed it. Then I was like, I can make good money doing this. And I put an ad in our local paper, and I can't drive, so people would drive their cars to my house. I would wash them, I would wax them, and then they would come get them and take them home. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I was like, well, in high school, I don't know if you know what detasseling is basically pulling before the tassels of the corn come out in the fields. You walk down the fields and pull all of the tassels out to let the male corn essentially pollinate the female corn only, so that the seed corn companies can actually have great mutated corn that grows taller with more ears, blah, blah, blah. And the first year I went out and I did this, and I was like, I'm getting screwed. I'm making like $12 an hour, and I know they're getting paid hundreds of dollars per acre. And so I was like this brash, 15-year-old. I just walked into the Pioneer, which is the big seed corn company. I was like, can I talk to a manager? And I was like, went and talked to him, and I was like, I'd like to get some acreage for next year. And he talked to me for about 15 minutes, and we signed a contract, and boom, I hired my own crew, and off we went for the next year. And so I started looking back at these events, and I was like, that's really interesting. Like, I didn't think about it that way then. I made a huge mistake. I ended up not, apparently when you have a crew, you need to put them on payroll, and you need to have them pay their taxes. So taxes was a complete disaster. But other than that, there's lots of those things. And, one of the stories that's not up here is really, I collected pennies when I was little. And so a friend of mine and I would go to the bank with a $20 bill. This is back when they wouldn't charge you money for like change, right? When we'd ask for $20 in pennies, they'd hand us a box of pennies, 50 cents in each roll. And we'd take that home and we'd painstakingly push them out, look through all of them to see if we were had any of the ones in our collection, and then put them all back in, take them back to the bank and say, can we have a different box? And we would do this forever, right? And it was the grit of, I just want to find every penny that I can possibly find. And it turns out my friend actually found, if you know anything about penny collecting, he found the 1909 VDB penny, which is very rare, very hard to find. He actually found that in a little town in Eldora, which is where I grew up, from the bank, pushing pennies out. I'm like, why didn't I get that box? I'm like, come on. So the entrepreneur theme basically really has come to light for me in the last few months. It's like, I think about, some of the stuff you'll hear about later, the real estate stuff, but I never thought about it as that before, right? I was always brought up under go to school, get a good job, buy a house, and so forth. So, and then I'm suddenly in college. And so I will say that I think that point of failure, really for me in college, the point of kind of like, oh, I'm not going to make this, or I make this and it turned out my way, was the first semester in college, right? It's really, I went as a chemical engineer, I switched to computer engineering. I was lucky enough in 1992 to have an ISDN line in my dorm room, which meant I had basically direct access to the internet before the internet was really as we know it today, the internet. This is back when Al Gore was still inventing it. And so one of the things, my college best friend asked me, was there, as I was preparing for this class, he's like, was there ever a time where you just totally screwed up in the beginning of a class and then had to dig your way out of the hole? And what did that look like? And Calc 165, which is Calc 1, is exactly that. Like, was doing great, went to the midterm, thought I knew it, got a really bad D. And I mean, it was like, what is this? Like, and I mean, the midterm was mind-boggling. It was like, no one's taught this stuff in class, right? And I was like, well, this sucks. And basically, it was the rest of the semester. Like, in order for me to get a good grade, like, I need to have an A on every assignment. I need to basically ace that final, and ended up, doing just that, because it was like the mentality was, this sucked. This happened to me. And at that point in time, I'm like, this wasn't my fault, right? I studied for this midterm. My teacher just didn't teach it, but it was like, I'm still accountable for the end grade, right? And so I think the lesson there is, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's like, you got to take care of your own stuff. So
I think there's another lesson there, and that is, when you see the first sign of it not going your way, what do? I think a lot of folks would, give up and drop class and start over next semester or something like that. And I think, it speaks to your personality, and I think one of your success traits is that you said, hey, now I'm going to win. What do I need to do in order to get back on track and overcome this?
And then just another example from college, Engineering 160 is where you learn to write on engineering paper and the proper letters and go do a little bit of research and do a project. And my favorite professor at school, Martha Selby, who every time I go back I go see her, she tells me I'm her favorite student, but I'm not sure. She does tell me I was a pain in the ass. But they had these projects, they were worth 100 points, and so I got the first one back, and it was like, I don't know what the grade was. I had them all for a while, and I think I finally threw them away. But it wasn't 100. And I looked at it and I went, just stupid mistakes, right? I could have had 100. And so at that point I set the goal, like, I really want to get 100 on one of these. And I even told her, right, which probably made my case worse. Because now she's like, I'm going to give him a 99 just for fun, right? But I basically, I would get one back. I would go discuss with her, hey, what would it have taken to make this better? What were you looking for? And learning. And I think that's really where I kind of clicked on, hey, if I go and I have a conversation, hey, this didn't go well, and how do I actually make this better? And continued. And I think she basically messed with me for the next 3 papers because I didn't get 100. And then on the very final one, she gave me 100. And that relationship, which is another key part of the story, is somewhere towards the end of the semester, she says, hey, I need a lab monitor to go basically be in charge of all the computers in the lab, open the doors, let people in, lock up at night, do that stuff. And I was looking for a job. And so I went down, talked to her, and said, I really, really, really want this job, right? And she hired me. And that lab monitor job basically lasted a semester, and then her and her other colleague, who both taught the honors section of this class, needed some software written. And I said, I can totally do that. So I moved from being a lab monitor to writing the software. Another department saw what we were doing, and they wanted work done for their department, so it became a kind of cross-collaboration across all engineering departments at the school. And what's crazy, it eventually led to me being her teaching assistant, which was fun, but you can't give people Fs in college, so that's no fun. We actually caught 2 people cheating, letter for letter, everything identical. I'm like, well, there's zeros, right? Because I'm grading the paper. She's like, I can't give them zeros. And I'm like, what? Like, they cheated. And the thing that's crazy is that this is the thing, the desire to get 100 on a lab paper led to Microsoft actually calling me, because the thing that Microsoft saw on my resume was the software work that I had done for her that never would have happened had I not had that desire just to do really well on some stupid project that really didn't matter in the long run, right? So those little things and those relationships that you build and the rapport that you build with people really, really matters in the long term.
I'll also pull out one other thing from that lesson, which I don't think was your main point, but you actually mentioned it, and that is being willing to vocalize what you want. Going in there and telling her that I really, really want this lab position. I definitely see that in you. You vocalize what you want, and then you go after it. So.
Yeah. And then I put this on here because this for me was a really crazy month. Like you go home your first semester from college, and I went home really upset because I had never gotten anything less than A's or B's in high school or middle school. And I went home thinking I'm getting 1 B and the rest are C's. And I was pretty much devastated, right? And so like every day I'm like drudging to the mailbox like, all right, let's have the news, right? And it came back and it was essentially all A's and B's. And I honestly think that I've always looked at that as like, I wonder where I would be if it would have been B's and C's, right? Just because it wasn't my expectation, it wasn't what I wanted, and I don't know how long it would have taken to come out of it, but I always think back and go, man, thank goodness for the curve or whatever, right? You know, I don't know what it was, but, and then just as an aside, you should not buy a new car as an intern at Microsoft. It's not a good decision. I found that out the hard way
I actually would like to talk about that.
All right.
Yeah, so the story goes, you
Brand
you bought a brand new car with monthly payments while you were an intern at Microsoft, then you got to go back to school for a year.
For a semester, yep. So, I mean, I had my contract signed for Microsoft for full-time employment. I bought a brand new Acura Integra GSR.
Nice car.
It was a very fun car. Stick shift, it was very fun to drive. The monthly payment on it was like $450. And this was in like 0 in college. Well, $12 an hour doing the software development work for like 10 to 15 hours a week. But I thought, I only have a semester left. It's only like 5 payments. Like, I can totally make that from savings. But, you know, and this was in 96, the end of 96. So I basically came back to school from January to May and then graduated. And that car actually caused me nothing but bad luck. Like the entire ownership of that car. So it was a very poor decision in terms of, you know, you're like, oh, I have a job at Microsoft. I have money that's future money, right? Which is a huge mistake, which is a mistake that many people at Microsoft make all the time. They're like, oh, I'm going to get a bonus at the end of the year. I'm going to get stock options, and they've spent it before they get it. And I think the lesson there is don't spend money until you have it. And my mom actually taught me, it's probably up there, right? The long-term value of saving, right? I mean, it was always, we went to the bank, which seems crazy now because they would open your little book, they would write the amount that you deposited in it and initial it. And I'm thinking,
that was the official balance.
Yeah.
I'm going to go change that to be $100 million.
Why was I not just putting ones in front of that? Like, what was I thinking? You know, and so it was like a weekly thing. You'd go to the bank, and if I wanted money, right, I'd go to the bank and I'd need to withdraw, but I had to save at least, you know, 10 to 20% of what I got. So it's that, you know, if you haven't instilled that and you have kids, definitely instill that.
So I totally see that you're a saver. Is that where you learned it? Is it the car, or was that mistake and then you figured it out after that? Because obviously that wasn't a sign of doing the right thing financially.
Yeah, I think the saving was learned early on. I think the car was the release of, I've made it, right? It's like I got the job at Microsoft, which in 1997 when I started full time was like the #1 company in the world to work for, right? And I was going to have an awesome job, and I had already been there for 16 months as an intern, and I was like, I've made it, the money will be there, you know, and it was the one splurge, if you will, that happened anywhere in that time.
So would you do it again, or was there a lesson that you wouldn't do it again?
Yeah, I definitely would not do it again. Okay. Yeah, it's not a good choice.
Okay.
So that takes us through kind of college and Microsoft and interning. I don't know if anyone has any questions or any of these relate to that. Feel free to ask questions too. This is supposed to be answer your questions more than anything else. Microsoft. So I was at Microsoft for about 13 years. And when I got there, kind of the relation to the bad decision in the car, right? Like I had debt coming from college. And I will tell you that debt basically ate at me.
How much debt did you have?
$25,000, which is small in comparison to what some people leave college with today, right? Where it's 6 figures and, you know, $250,000. But this is also a long time ago, right? So, and this was on a credit card. It wasn't in student loans.
How'd you get 25K in credit card debt? Are you willing to share that?
So about 6,500 of it was me buying a new computer in school so that I could have the best possible computer to learn with, which I think made a difference. There was about $8,000 in school loan that I eventually paid off with the credit card, which is probably also a bad decision. And so I had this $25,000, I was making this monthly payment, but the problem was my Microsoft income was less than my actual current expenses because I had bought a house. And so as things looked, it was just going to get worse and worse and worse until I got a raise or something like that at Microsoft. And so that was a really, really stressful time.
So you were actually upside down on your monthly living expenses because you bought was it a bigger house that you could afford, or was it a starter home and you?
It was like the cheapest house that you could buy, but it was still way expensive, right?
And you didn't have roommates?
I eventually did, yes.
Is that one of the ways you solved it?
So what I ended up doing is I transferred the $25,000 to Citibank had an offer, and it was like, oh, interest-free for the life of the balance. And so I was like,
interest-free for the life of the balance?
Yes.
Wow, that's pretty.
And I was like, excellent. I called them up and I was like, I have $25,000 I want to transfer. And they transferred it, but I had bought, and they were like, so I paid off the card because anything underneath it would still earn interest. And then I had to buy a plane ticket. And the plane ticket actually hit before the transfer. So I had this like plane ticket just sitting there piling up interest underneath this $25,000 balance, which was really frustrating for me as well, even though it was paled in comparison to what it could have been. But eventually, I mean, you know, things turned around. I got a raise at Microsoft. I got a roommate and basically paid that $25,000 off and really have never had any debt outside of real estate debt after that, because it just, sleeping at night was just not fun. So.
Is that an important lesson, you think? Is that a factor in your success, you think, of not having any type of consumer debt besides the houses?
I think it is, especially in what we do, right? Real estate investing, when you go to the bank and they're like, hey, oh, you have an $800 car payment, or oh, you have, you know, a $200 a month payment on a piano that you bought. They look at that and they go, well, that just reduces your debt to income ratio. And so with no debt, it's very easy to just tell the bank, yeah, my credit score is above 740. I have no debt other than the properties I've shown you. And it's very simple for them. So you can make your life really easy, I think, in that perspective.
So what kind of stuff did you learn working at Microsoft? Because I think that's a unique experience. Anyone else here work at Microsoft ever? Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, like, what your experience there. What lessons did you pull away from Microsoft?
Lots of stuff. I think, so my experience at Microsoft when I started, just to kind of give you an example of like what my career was like, I was super fortunate that I got to start working on Actimates, which we actually made Barney, Arthur and DW. They were robotic toys that actually interacted with the computer, interacted with the TV, so you could watch a TV show and the toy would actually talk to the TV and respond to it. It's first of its kind, but Microsoft doesn't generally do kids products. They did a few, Creative Writer and Fine Artist and 3D Movie Maker, which I also worked on. But that's where I started. And Microsoft is fairly intense, especially in the early days. When I showed up, it was about a 30,000 person company. When I left, it was over 100,000. 30,000 actually felt like a startup company. The group I worked in was about 200 people. It's called the Hardware Group. And they basically made kind of all the Actimate stuff, mice, keyboards, remote controls, gaming devices. If you've ever played with any of those, you're probably still running some of the code that I eventually wrote. But I went from working on kids' toys to working on keyboards and mice to kind of being a development manager and then a software group manager and then a director. And then I was tapped to go do some special project stuff for Digital Pen. And then after Digital Pen, I went to work on Surface. And Surface is if you guys are familiar with Surface Computer, I basically worked with the team that turned it from a giant table, from a prototype into an actual physical product. So I had exceptional opportunity where most people's careers at Microsoft are, they work in Windows for 10 years or 20 years, or they work in Office, and that seems horribly boring to me. So I got lucky. When I went to interview, this isn't even in there, but this is a good lesson of why communication is so important. When when I went to interview for my first internship, I went to interview as a developer, and I went through my interviews, and 2 of them I'm fairly sure I did at least okay. The other 2 I knew I just totally sucked. And in one of them I explained, like, he asked me to write a doubly linked list, so if you know what that is, great. If not, it doesn't matter. And I had just written this, but I had written it using a library, and so I was trying to write it and it wasn't working, and then at the end I figured out why, and I explained to him, I'm like, hey, I get why I'm making this mistake. This is what I would have done. Tried to like just spill it all in 5 minutes before he's like, never hire this guy, he's terrible, right? And so what happened is in 4 interviews, 2 of which I probably did okay, and 2 I definitely got, you know, this guy sucks as a developer. I got sent back to the recruiter, and the recruiter basically said, you know, the development position's not for you, but everyone that you talked to said you should be at Microsoft. You communicated well, you were smart, blah, 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 and so we're gonna send you over to the test side and have you talk with the manager. And so I had a conversation with him, and he hired me. And so it's that, even when you know you screw up, you're like, and this would never happen today at Microsoft, honestly. It just wouldn't. The systems, you would have been kicked out the door after the 2 no hires, and it wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have happened. So there's some luck in there, and whether I somehow made that my own luck is unclear. But those are the things that I think, you know, for all the times my meal comes wrong when I order food, that's the other side of it. If you ever go out to a restaurant with me, my food will come incorrect every time. I've been paying that debt for a long time. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, question.
13 years. 13 years at Microsoft, that was the question.
And another question. And when you started getting into investments, were you still working at Microsoft? Was that later?
Nope. We'll talk a little bit about this down here, but it was not until I really came to Fort Collins.
Where were you living?
As in Redmond, Washington. Yeah, that's headquarters for Microsoft. Yeah. They're all over the world, obviously, but that's the huge campus that continues to sprawl. I think, you know, I've talked about this some, your team matters, especially the weakest link in your team, and I say that because if you, in general, know where your weakest link is, you should replace your weakest link with something much stronger. One of the examples is I took over a software team. It was unexpected. The guy was actually in Europe on a singing tour, and I became his manager, and he got a demotion from being a lead to an individual contributor, and he unfortunately read his email from newest to oldest to find this out. So I was like emailing him, telling him things that I would like him to work on when he got back, and he's like, why are you emailing me this stuff? And it turned out that he was really bringing the team down, and so I actually ended up having to fire him, and it was really painful. It's the first person I ever fired. The day I actually terminated him was actually the actual 9/11, so it made it that much worse. It was a pretty horrible day on all accounts. I actually thought he was going to shoot me in the parking lot for like 6 months after that, but he didn't, thankfully, obviously, because I'm still here. But literally the next day in the team meeting, the enthusiasm and the environment and the attitude was different. And you don't realize how much that one pull down really pulls down. So that's that one. Managing people. This is just a huge learning when you go from individual contributor to manager of managers. You would do it one way. You know how you would do it. Someone else is going to do it different. You would prefer for them to do it your way. This is probably an ongoing theme in my life. And they don't do it that way, but they're still successful. And so really learning that your way is not the only way. Your way may be faster for you, but it's not necessarily faster or intuitive for someone else. And so letting someone else have that rope to do what they want to do in the way they want to do it, and then having them be successful is really key.
I think we still see that with property management today.
Yes. Yes. I think that's more to the last bullet on this one. There's a lot of multi-year planning stuff, which you get from the goal setting and you get from the one thing classes that we've taught here, which is, you know, it's important to be able to look beyond, hey, I want to buy this one house. Why do you want to buy this one house, right? Like, why are you trying to buy more than one house? What are you going to do a year from now? And it's really that, hey, the goal is to have this. How do you get there? And backing away from that and figuring out how to actually plan for that.
And we're going to talk more about that at the end of the month in the special class we're doing on making bets and stuff.
There's a lot of goal setting that goes on at Microsoft. There's a lot of what's called stretch goals, which at Microsoft are really just more like, hey, your normal goals are the stuff we expect you to do, and you better do it really well. If you really want to do well, you need to actually do these stretch goals and do them really well. And the stretch goals are things that you would think of as above and beyond normal expectations.
So did you do the stretch goals, or did you just do the bare minimum to survive?
Yeah, I did the stretch goals. And so the attitude at Microsoft, there used to be a rating system. It's totally changed now, but there was a 3.0, which meant you were doing your job. There was a 3.5, which meant you were doing above the expectations for your kind of goals. And there was a 4.0. Those are the three main ratings. And the 4.0 was, hey, you knocked it out of the park. There were also 4 5s and 5 0s. But the three main ones were that. And the way we talked about it as managers so that people understood is if you got a 3.0 year after year after year, you were falling behind. 3.5 was the average. 3.0 was this. 4.0 was this. So if you wanted to be on even an even trajectory, you needed to be doing above what was necessary to actually be successful. So I think that kind of environment just instills it more and more, right? Like go above and beyond, do everything you can. End-to-end product development. So like I said, I was super fortunate in that I got to see product development from literally idea all the way through product being shipped. And a lot of it was physical products. So most people, it's like, hey, I wrote this piece of software for Windows or Office, and they check it in, and it somehow magically becomes Windows, right? That's not what our group did, and I was super fortunate. And I think that applies to, hopefully what you guys see from, self-directed 401k class or asset protection class, where I want to understand how every part works. I don't want to just understand, hey, I can buy a house and rent it out and make money. I want to know, okay, how can I do that? How can I do it efficiently? How do I have the best tenant selected? How do I have the best property manager? How do I protect my assets in the best possible way? So I think that and really learning to understand every cycle of development from, hey, we have this product idea to it's being built in China and then shipped here, and how does it sell and how do we market it? And we were such a small team that I was fortunate enough to be able to see all of that. So I think that's really important, and it's really applied over to the real estate investing where, understanding every single phase, not all at once, right? Understand it as you need it, but really dive in and understand, why are my taxes this way, right? So, and then I'm sure I think this is James's quote, actually, from last week when we talked, which is, I really have high expectations with a very low tolerance for poor performance. So if any of you have ever asked me for help, I'm happy to give it. My expectation when I give it is that you go take action on it. And if you don't, it's very difficult if you come back and we have the same conversation.
Or you ask for help in another area when you haven't taken action on the first thing yet.
Yes. And I've freely given my time. I've gone on seller presentations with people in the room. And it's very easy to do, and I really enjoy doing it. And one of the things is, why the heck do you do that, Brian? And for me, I didn't give a lot back at Microsoft. I really felt like wherever I go after that, I want to give back, and I want to be able to help. And I really loved managing people. That was what I was great at Microsoft. I was not the best developer, I was not the best tester, but I was in a very high pool of managers who were great at Microsoft. And so taking that skill set and helping other people build something, right? The goal on my side is I want to see action. And so.
I think that's one of the reasons why you teach classes, is you like when you give people advice about what has worked for you, and then you see people actually implement that.
Yeah.
I think that's really rewarding.
Yes.
And I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you, but one of the times when you first started coming here and we started doing classes, one of the things I got really burned out with is people always wanted to know how to do marketing to find off-market deals.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many times I've taught people how to do postcards, but the small number of people that actually do something with that information, it's really frustrating.
Yep.
So.
Just a funny story. I took a second mortgage on my house, probably another bad money-making decision, and then day traded with those funds.
So let me get this right. So you actually mortgaged your house to do day trading with?
Yep. So I would go into work at 6 a.m. and I would day trade till 9 a.m. at Microsoft, and then I would do my full-time job. Some of it worked out really well, some of it didn't.
So would you recommend other people do that now?
Absolutely not. You know, another one that my college best friend, who actually ended up working for me at Microsoft for a while, he was like, you know, wasn't there a time where they threw you into a role that you were like, thought you had 6 months to prepare for? Like I had switched from working on kids' toys to keyboards, and the software for keyboards, the guy that was there is a genius. I mean, he's just unbelievable architect type guy, and he had basically architected stuff, started writing it, and he's like, basically, I'm going to take you under my wing for 6 months. You're going to learn all this. 2 weeks later, he's like, I'm out. And I was like, what? How am I going to get this done? And there's no one else to do it. Like, I'm the only one on the team at this point. So it was hire a team, try to figure out how to architect this, and still ship on time. And it was really daunting, right? And so I did kind of what I talked about. I went and I learned every single detail of how this worked. And so I just would study every night, like, how is this working? I would look stuff up, I would test stuff, and then finally when it came time to actually produce, it took very little time to produce the actual software, right? It was like 4 days of writing code and like 2.5 months of studying, right? And I think that's really applicable to real estate investing, right? You may spend 4 months looking for a property and planning on how you're going to do it, getting all your stuff in line, and then taking it down. So,
yeah, I'll add one thing to that. So, you know, 5 years ago, if you came here and you wanted to do that in the real estate world, it would be really hard because the classes are only once a week. But now we've got recordings of 100+ classes. So you guys have access. If you really wanted to say, I'm going to go for this and do it, you could go and watch all 100 of the classes and be ready to do whatever you need to do.
Yeah. And so much like the first semester in college, the Microsoft stock collapse was probably one of the most kind of impactful things during my Microsoft career, because kind of everyone before me was in the period where, oh, they worked there 5 years and then a lot of them retired, right? And then there's the phase that I'm in where you work there and you thought you were going to have a lot of money, and then the stock crashed and morale took just a giant dump at the company, right? And everyone who was like, oh, I'm going to retire in a year was now like, I'm working for at least 10 more, right? And it was, looking back at it, there was a large amount of money on the table for me, and looking at it and going, you were just stupid and greedy, right? Because I was thinking, if the stock just splits one more time and goes to 120, I'm going to sell it all, and I'm going to just be done, right? Naivety of a 26-year-old or something, right? And so you watch this giant imaginary pool of money basically just go and then keep going and keep going along with everyone around you. And I will tell you that was one of the hardest things. It bugged me for probably a decade. It just...
What year was that?
2008.
So the question was, what year was that?
No, 2000, you're right. Yeah, the giant tech crash of 2000. Yeah. See, I'm all on real estate. It's like the real estate crash, 2008. Yes. But it was very painful. And the lesson that I learned was, you know, when you see that, don't be greedy. So, you know, if you are in that situation and you're like, hey, my company has a lot of stock and it's gone up a lot, take some off the table, right? Just put it away. Because I would have been much better even selling it half. Right? Sell half of it, watch the rest of it go to, you know, garbage for a long time, but didn't.
So how does that apply to people today? Because I want to be very clear in the lesson that you're saying. So somebody who works at a tech company now and they're getting, you know, options or stocks or anything like that, and it's been going up like great. I mean, the market's doing really well. Would you encourage them to diversify? What are you specifically saying for them?
Yeah.
You lived through this. You lived through a decline and saw a really downside of it.
Yeah, I mean, my portfolio was 100% Microsoft, right? My 401k was in Microsoft, my stock options were in Microsoft, and my ESPP shares were in Microsoft. So, like, it hurts bad when it goes down. And when it drops from 120 to like 30, it really sucks.
So you lost like 75% of your net worth.
Yep.
In like what time period?
4 months.
So 4 months, you went from I'm getting close to retirement to no way.
Yeah. I mean, and the retirement there was like, not what I would think I would need today, but as a 26-year-old, you're like, hey, that's plenty of money, right? So
So specifically, you would encourage them to take some out now and invest in
Other
something
things,
else?
yes.
Does it have to be real estate? Could it be other things?
It could be anything else, honestly. But I mean, I would prefer real estate if it was me. But something besides the thing that you're invested fully in.
But how do you argue with somebody who's like, but it's been going up 20% a
Yeah.
year? I mean,
You just wait for it to correct 20 points and ask them how they feel. Tomorrow if you woke up and it was down 20 or 30 points, how would you feel, right? And it doesn't feel good. And instead of 20 or 30, what if it was 50, right?
It will happen.
Yes, at some point it will happen, right? There's one other thing I wanted to talk about. I don't remember what it was. We can keep going. And the opposite. Oh, I know what it is. So the really hard thing is that I'm super passionate about Microsoft. I loved Microsoft. I still love Microsoft. Not everything was perfect, and there's a lot of things that could still use to change. But part of the problem is that you're like, it's my company. It's awesome. Everyone else is going to think it's awesome. But they don't, because that's just how you feel because you work there, right? So it's finding the way to break the attachment to the company and realize, you know what? 20 years from now, I'm going to be glad I sold 10% of this year and 15% of it next year and 20% of it next year. Because that's what my financial planner basically came in and she was like, you're 93% Microsoft. We need to sell 40% of that this year. And I was like, what? Like, get out. Like, that's not happening. And it took her like 6 months to really convince me. And then it was this plan. And pretty soon, it got down to the point where it was like, other than stock options, which isn't really yours until you buy it and sell it, I was at 0% Microsoft ownership, right? And it felt so much better because I felt so much more safe and secure.
Hey, let me go off script and kind of twist this around. So let's say someone, instead of being invested in Microsoft and the risk of Microsoft going all the way down, or another tech company.
Like Broadcom?
Like Broadcom or something like that. But let's say hypothetically someone is completely invested in real estate. Do you feel any differently about being completely invested in real estate and the risk that could go down? I mean, how do you look at those things?
Yeah, I don't feel the same way for a couple of reasons. I mean, real estate for me is I bought real estate that produces cash flow, and I don't care if the value of the actual real estate goes down, right? I mean, my holdings could go down 25 or 30% tomorrow, and it wouldn't really, I mean, I would be like, oh, that sucks. But the cash flow would probably remain close to the same, right? So in that sense, it doesn't bother me. Would I enjoy it? No, but I also look at it and I go, I can't control any of the stock market, right? I can totally control my houses or my apartment buildings by changing how I manage them and still making them stay afloat.
So let's say the market changes and now rents go down. And rents aren't going to drop immediately because you've got leases on there. But let's say a year or two from now you start seeing pretty significant declines in that. Does that change how you feel about being 100% invested in real estate?
Not really. I think the same thing applies, right? It's like if I had to take management back from a property manager, I could do that to save money, right? If I have to lower rents, I've modeled my portfolio to where it's like, hey, I can still survive this much with a rent downturn. And if I look at the history of real estate, across any 15-year period of time, real estate has never gone down. So am I worried about Fort Collins? No. If I was in other markets, might I be more concerned? Yes. But here, not so much.
Okay. I got a question.
I was just wondering if you can share in your modeling how much of a percent decrease in rents do you have in your model?
I would become break even at 23% vacancy and a 23% decline in rents, which in my mind will never happen here.
So I'll make a comment on that. And one of the things we're doing with the new calculator that we're modeling is I created a trademark term called resiliency. And it measures how far rents can decline or how far vacancy can go up or things like that. And it can show you on your portfolio or individual properties what the sensitivity is to those types of market changes. And so we're going to start teaching some classes on that. It just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. And then oddly, I don't know if it was my dad kind of just understanding in the back of my mind, I bought the Carlton Sheets course from Late Night TV, right? Because I'm up late night, one night watching it, and I'm like, I think I could totally do that. And so I bought it. It's where James learned to invest.
That is not true.
That's what it says.
Does it say it there? That is so funny. Yeah. So basically, what I heard you say is, hey, I'm going to give up this amazing job at Microsoft to go do like late night TV infomercial real estate
No,
investing.
I was going to do it at the same time.
Oh, you're going to do both of them?
Yeah, I wasn't day trading anymore. I got in trouble with the SEC, so I couldn't do that anymore. But I was like, oh, this seems legitimate, right? I mean, I could add, they're showing people with checks of, oh, I went to closing and I got $20,000 from essentially wholesaling a property. And I was like, oh, I could totally figure out how to do that, right? And then, I got the course, I looked through it, and I was like, man, the house prices here just don't really seem like they're going to do that. And this is at the point where house prices there are like $250,000 to $300,000.
So isn't this super interesting? Basically, he buys a late night infomercial TV course and he decides his market is too expensive. How many people here have ever thought our market is too expensive to invest? All right, so what did you do? Did you decide to invest in a market that was too expensive?
I didn't. And
Why
so,
not?
Because I came from a place where when I bought my first house, it was a $250,000 house in Redmond, which was nice location, close to Microsoft. I could have bought farther away for less, but that was like the cheapest house. And the house that my parents lived in, the house I grew up in was probably a $30,000 house in Eldora, Iowa, right? Or a $40,000 house. And then the house that my parents lived in, which if we transported it magically to Fort Collins, would be like a $450,000 house, is probably today worth $80,000 or $90,000. And so I call my mom, right? And I'm like, Mom, I have a house under contract. And I'm like, it costs $250,000. She probably almost dropped dead, right? She was like, what? Because in her mind, she's like, that's 4 times more expensive than the house we currently live in. That's insane. It's your first house. And so there's that mindset of, this is really expensive, right? This is unbelievable. And so looking at what it would have taken and how much money down payment wise or whatever to try and go do this Carlton Sheets thing, I finally was just like, maybe not, right? And I didn't do it.
But what were rents like? I mean, could you get like
no idea.
$2,500 a month in rent for a $250,000 property?
No. So I will tell you, if I just simply would have held on to my $250,000 house and rented it out and been a nomad, because I eventually moved to a different house, that $250,000 house was now worth about $700,000. And it's like, oh man. That was about a 20-year time span, I think, something like that.
So it tripled in value in 20 years almost?
Yep. So that's really that. And then I just wanted to share this with you, and this is actually I am a saver of sentimental things for me. James can tell you that I know dates of lots of things that are important to me.
Some things that are not important.
In James's mind, yes. So there came a point in time in my career where I had done really well in the previous stuff, and my VP, who was Lisa Brummel, who I highly respect and still respect to this day. She was awesome. I couldn't have asked for a better vice president. She, I think, reports directly to Bill now. She basically took over all of HR, revamped it, made the company much, much better. And they basically said, hey, we want you to go run Surface. At this time, it was called Table because it was actually a giant table where 4 people could sit around it, put their fingers on it, and move it. And it was one of the guys that worked for me had actually invented it. He's like the smartest guy I know. He's like, when he was in high school, he was on the cover of like Discovery magazine, and he had like hooked electrodes to a moth's wings to drive a car. And I was like, dude, how many brains are in your head? Like 17 or, I mean, pretty insane. And so he invented, Table, and they were basically a very early on kind of prototype, just team, lots of people, and they said, hey, do you want to go run it? I was like, are you going to advance the slide? But I guess you can't. And so I asked my vice president, I said, what should I do? And she sent me this email, which some of it's not as important, but I'm going to read it to you anyway, because some of it's really important in just life lessons. And she's super experienced in product development. But she basically says, Table's an opportunity to do an end-to-end project in an area that no one has touched before. So we talked about why I think end-to-end is important, right? Learning kind of every little detail. It's a chance to ship innovation. It's rare at Microsoft to be able to do an end-to-end project. It's more rare to ship something really, really different. To do this, you must have the mindset that it can be done, right? And I think that is whatever you're going to go do, if you don't have that mindset, you're setting yourself up to not succeed. If you don't, it will fail. Much of this is very entrepreneurial, just as a startup company would be. You'll have to fight to get it shipped and fight to get it accepted. However, if you can get even basic traction in the market, you will do something that very few people get the chance to do here. The opportunity for failure, not success. Your opportunity to fail is monumentally higher than 95% of the jobs at Microsoft for people at your level or even above. So you really, really have to believe it can work, right? Same thing every day in life. You will have to push and adjust and look differently and beg to get this thing out to market. Just like today, we have to look differently at our market and find ways to make money in real estate that aren't necessarily the same as what we did 5 years ago.
And that statement is really a statement of grit.
Yep. Again, just like if you had your own company and were launching a new product. Bill, so this is Bill Gates, thinks it's cool, he loves it and will always love it, which is very much Bill. Bill loves products. He's an amazing guy. Robbie, who was Robbie Bach, he was the senior vice president, thinks it's cool and would love to see it ship, but can't devote any bandwidth to it. And Steve, which is Steve Ballmer, thinks it's cool, but doesn't believe the business model works. So here's a setup. The number 2 guy at the company thinks your business model doesn't work. Would you like to go do this? You're set up to fail. This is really about wanting to do something with a brand new product. If you feel from a career perspective you need to take a safer bet and stay in hardware and move up the line, I would understand that. You'll progress at a good pace and maybe even a great pace, but you'll never get a chance to do an end-to-end like this. And this is the quote and how I found the email, because this quote has always stuck in my mind. It's really your call on whether you want to be an entrepreneur or a middle manager. And that was the only thing I actually remembered from the entire email. And I was like, well, the email is actually quite telling. But this is the choice, right? You all have this choice. You can either decide, I'm going to do this, or you can decide, I'm going to work my 9-to-5 job and get paid not as much as I want to and have that kind of weight on you. So what choice do you want to make? So after some thought, I'm sure you can imagine what I decided since you already know. It was a very tough choice because I was in the job I had always wanted to do when they asked me to do this, right? The job I went to Microsoft to do was basically become a software group manager where I was managing the entire software process. And I had created that, but this came up and it was like, oh, this was a job I wanted. What do you do? So I took the job, I let her know, and this was her response. The table's near and dear to me. I know you'll do a great job. Take risks, be smart, and have fun. 6 words that couldn't sum it up better, right? No matter what you're doing, if you take risks, you be smart, and you have fun, you're probably going to be successful, right? Throw some grit in there, and you'll be good.
Can I make a weird comment on that?
Yeah, comment. 1 second.
There's a level of mentality that you kind of get from the way she writes and the way she thinks that is not common.
Oh, no doubt.
She is obviously a very high-level thinker, and I can understand why somebody like that would be, I don't know, drawing to you. Like you would want to follow them.
Yeah, and I mean, Microsoft vastly changed when I was there, but she's a very exceptional person. And she'll come up again probably on this slide. So then I decided I was done at Microsoft. I had had my fun, and I decided to go play poker for 3 years in Vegas. And I did a sabbatical test run. I'm going to try and fly through some of this because I see James looking at his watch, thinking we got to get to the real estate stuff. I wore out one of the rugs in my house from pacing back and forth trying to make this decision. The decision took about a year. And so how do you leave this kind of golden handcuff job with the promise of more money, more money, more money, and go do something that you may lose money doing, right? Poker's vastly different than a normal job because you can show up with $10,000, sit down to play, and go home with 0. Imagine if you went to work next week and on your paycheck, they were like, you owe us $6,000, because that's what poker's like, right? You don't necessarily make money. And that's a very different way of thinking.
Why did you decide to play poker to begin with? What was the attraction?
That's a good question.
What did you expect to?
A lot of it's competition. So one of my friends at work introduced me to playing poker. I quickly started playing poker online and logged on to PokerStars and quickly lost $5,000 in the matter of a few months. And it was $600 at a time because that's all you could deposit. And at some point, I had had enough, right? And this is the bit that flips for me in almost kind of everything. It's like, I know I can win. And I was like, I'm going to get my money back. And so I buckled down. I started studying. I watched other players. Every piece of information I could get, every book I could read. I had a collection of 40 or 50 poker books, read them all again, and started playing at lower stakes and earning my money back. Got the $5,000 back, pulled it out, and played on house money ever since then. So it's really that just, you know, I'm the guy when it's like the Broncos are down by 15 and there's a minute and a half left and we don't have the ball. I'm like, we can still win, right? And that's how that's how I think about it, you know? If James and I are playing a game and he's beating me, like if he lets up, he's probably gonna lose. I went through this book called Second Acts trying to make this decision. And if you're ever trying to decide what you want to do next, it's a great book. It walks you through the 10 or 12 most common fears. You can pull them out for yourself. These are my two. You guys can read them. But basically it was, I won't have enough money. And this is literally the text. I went back and pulled it out of what I had written down. So that I won't have enough money. And I'll have to be like, oh, I can't go to Starbucks and buy this crazy, high caloric intake drink that I can't even finish. And the other worry was, I'm leaving known, right? My entire identity was Microsoft. And I will tell you that if you've ever been in a job for any length of time, your identity will get wrapped up in that. And when you leave, it's very difficult because you want people to feel, hey, you're important somehow. And eventually you realize you're just kind of important as a person, hopefully. So I went back to Lisa B., the vice president, when I was thinking about leaving and met with her in her office, which was literally right down the hall from Bill through the bulletproof glass. And I said, yo, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing, because she had heard. And I was like, what would you do? And, very much to your point, right? Very high level thinker. She's like, well, do you think you can be successful at it? And are you passionate about it? And I said, yep and yep. And she said, well, I'll tell you something that not many people know. If I was you, and it wasn't poker, but it was golf, and I thought I could go be on the LPGA, I would quit here and I would go take my shot. And so at that point, this decision became very simple for me. It was like, well, I'll go take my shot. She's like, if you ever want to come back, there's always a place, right? And that's like the safety cushion that kind of helps with the money. But really, I could always go get a job, right? It's not like I never believed I couldn't go get a job. So that was a fun discussion. And then really the other part was just having people go, what is wrong with you, dude? I actually went to some dinner with a bunch of people I didn't know, and they're asking, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm leaving in, a month. And they're like, what are you gonna go do? And I'm like, I'm moving to Vegas to play poker professionally. And he literally couldn't contain his laughter. He was laughing, the whole room could hear him, and he thought I was joking, right? And I'm like, I'm serious. And he just kept laughing. And I was like, that's a very good indication that people don't understand, right? And it's very hard to convince somebody, hey, you're gonna go from a 6-figure paying job to maybe losing money. Why would you do that? And it's like, well, why would you stay in a job that you come to work for and you don't really enjoy maybe? So dealing with this, I think the lesson here is, it's the team that you have around you matters. Without Beth, without James and Tammy, and without my kids, without Royce, without my friends and my close circle, this would be way harder, right? I'd be much less successful. So I think, thinking about that is very important, right? When people are pushing against you and you're really passionate about doing something, think about what that means. I learned a few things playing live and online. So I played mostly online, even though I lived in Vegas. That sounds horribly stupid. Why did you move to Vegas? When I played online, I would play 24 tables at the same time on 2 large monitors, which is really grueling on your mind. You make more decisions in about 6 hours than you normally make as a human in a day. We added them up one day. But what people don't understand, and this theme's out in real estate too, is it's all the study and all the stuff that goes into being good at something no one ever sees. They're just like, oh, you're playing poker and you're winning, you must be lucky. No, it's not that simple, right? And there's a huge social aspect and guilt with poker that you're really not contributing to society, right? You're sitting around, and there's a really odd dilemma where if we sit down at a poker table, and I know you because, not you specifically, but I know you because I see you once a week when you get your paycheck and I watch you cash it at the cashier and then come over and you lose it every week at the poker table. Do I take your money? I'm a better player. Do I take your money? Or do I tell you, hey, you should go home and buy some food? And then what do? You get up and you go to another table and my competitor takes your money. It's a really weird, guilty, horrible kind of social situation, right? So there's more stuff going on there that I think most people realize. Some other things I learned: play the hand you're dealt, right? And this isn't life, right? Life's not fair. Get used to it. I tell my kids this all the time. It just isn't, right? I said yes to you and I said no to you, and it was 10 seconds apart. That's just how it is, and I have a reason, but you don't need to know it. But play the hand you're dealt, right? Make your own luck, which, you know, I don't really think there's a thing such as luck, although there's definitely bad luck in me getting food orders. Like literally every time incorrect. But make your own luck, right? Do the things that go be great at something and make your own luck by building your reputation, building rapport with people, building those relationships. Yeah, you can come to class to find out about this, but I think I'm probably not as good at this as I really could be, which is being proactive and not reactive. I'm proactive when it comes to like buying real estate, but there are definitely micro instances of that where I suck, and it's just terrible because I'm reactive and I'm like, tell that buyer to go fly a kite. And James is like, I'll smooth that over. I'll tell them you're not interested. I'm like, no, really, tell them to go fly a kite. So risk reward, right? If you don't risk anything, it's really hard to get a bigger reward. And that's true, I think, in real estate. I think it's true in poker and everywhere else. And then the transition out of poker. On my birthday, the DOJ shut down PokerStars. It's known as Black Friday in the poker community, which really sucked for me. But I had a poker coach before that who was trying to be the guy that had played the most hands ever on PokerStars. He wanted to play 4 million hands in a year. And I watched him do this, and I'm like, I can write some software that will help manage the logistics of what you're doing and cut down your time. He had Lyme disease, and so he was literally playing like 13 and a half hours every day, planned for 20 days off in entirety throughout the year. And I was like, you're gonna die. And so I watched him. I wrote some software for him. It exceeded his expectations. It's cut his daily window of play from 13 and a half hours down to 10, which he was ecstatic about. So he could just play 13 and a half and take more days off if he wanted. But he basically told 2 of his other students, and they were like, well, I want that. And word of mouth happened, and my reputation on the poker forums grew. And literally 6 months later, I had a business that was making $100,000 in profit just from writing some simple software. So the thing here is that opportunity is everywhere, right? And I can't state this enough. There's so much opportunity, whether it's real estate or some other side hustle, that just look for. It's there. And then what happened was PokerStars, which is the #1 poker site, saw the software that I was writing, and they hired me on as a consultant to help them implement some of the software that I had written so that they could be even better, which that was a whole other story for some other day. Then I started a fitness company, because why not? I did P90X. I found CrossFit. I loved most of it. We can have that whole conversation after class if you really want to know what I didn't like. I got certified in a couple things. I started training people. And again, for me, what I've learned in life is when I get passionate about something, take notice. Because it's really hard if somebody says, hey, what are you going to do next? And you don't know. That's downtime for me. That's like, it'll take a year for something to come along. And I've learned in my life, when it comes, just grab on and go, right? Don't look back, just go, because otherwise I get bored. I moved in 2012 to Fort Collins with plans to open a gym. I rented, unbelievably, in Southeast Fort Collins, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, furnished condo is about 1,000 square feet. It was $2,200 a month. Yeah, and I was like, that's crazy.
Is this the one where someone died in it?
Yep. So at some point, I'm talking to the downstairs neighbor, and he goes, whoa, do you know what happened? And I was like, no. He goes, oh, yeah, I wouldn't go in the second bathroom if I were you. Some guy, like, killed himself with a shotgun in there. Okay, thanks. So I looked at this and I was like, how much is this condo? How much did he pay for it? And I went and looked. He bought it at like a short sale or an auction because somebody was trying to get rid of it.
Obviously.
And I was like, he paid like $150. They were going for like $170. And I was like, oh, I made a spreadsheet. I didn't even know what I was doing, right? I was like, hey, $2,200 minus how much is insurance, how much is taxes, how much is the mortgage. And I'm like, this person is killing it, right? I'm gonna buy all of these condos, right? That was my first thought. I'm gonna make them furnished rentals. This is gonna be awesome, right? And then what happens? The neighbor acquaintance, right? Build relationships. I work out in the garage that's outside with the door up, and they walk their dogs every day, so we became friends. And sure enough, they're like, hey, we're gonna move, we're gonna sell our condo. And I was like, I'm gonna buy it. Cancel your appointment with your realtor. And they did, and I bought it. And I was like, I'm gonna make this a furnished rental. And I will tell you, during the process of this, I literally cried because I was scared that this was not the right decision to make. So if you ever think that there's not fear involved in doing this stuff, you're wrong.
I'll point out one other thing about this. So
Did I cry all the time at movies?
Well, that too.
Okay.
But so you were literally renting a place, didn't own your own place or anything.
It
like
was
that,
being built and it was under contract.
But you were buying a rental property while you were renting.
Yep. So I thought it'd be furnished. Did a whole bunch of research on that. Turns out that's not the plan. I figured out it'd be much easier to just rent it as a normal rental. I had it rented, so the day I bought it, they came, they put new carpet in, and the tenant moved in that same day. The only downside was that I lived literally right across the parking lot from the tenant, so I became the tenant's like personal question answer. How does the internet work? That is not a landlord's question. That is a question for Comcast. And so this really started real estate. We're only like half an hour behind where James said he would make me be. And this is when I met James, because I was like, I've got this condo under contract. What should I do? How do I rent it? I had a whole bunch of questions. Somebody said, hey, go to this meetup. It wasn't this one. It was the one that Pine Financial used to run. And so I went, and the only thing that the person told me, I don't even remember who told me this. Do you?
I thought it was Justin, but I could be wrong.
It wasn't. And they were like, so the guy you want to talk to is James Orr, but he talks really fast. And I was like, that's a weird, I'm thinking that's a weird comment. I'm like, good, because if he talks slow, that would be really boring, right? That's my thought. And so we sat down after this meeting. I introduced myself, and basically I think we sat there and talked for like 3 hours. And then we realized we had the same father or mother. Just kidding. And so I don't even remember how this deal actually happened. I think, I know it wasn't you that directly helped me because you were changing your business model, but did you refer Mike to me?
I found the tenant buyer, and I started doing specific advertising for you.
It wasn't for me.
It was.
No, it wasn't.
It totally was.
No, it was not.
I remember we sat down at the bar, and I explained to you why you might be interested in doing lease options. And you're like,
what I remember.
That you're like, this. Okay, I would be interested in that. So I started doing marketing for you specifically.
Yeah. So a tenant buyer was found, and I ended up buying a 100-year-old house in Loveland, and lease optioned it to this person, and it was scary as hell. Because I'm like, I don't want a 100-year-old house, but this is the house the person picked out. And they had $17,000 as an option fee, and the house was only about $100,000. And so put her in the house, and it went 5 years, and I sold the house earlier this year. But on the paper, it seems like it's a home run. It seemed like more than 100% per year return, which you don't find hardly ever. Most of that's because she's putting almost the entire down payment down. But I mean, the second deal, lease option. So now I need to like go get a lease and option contract. I need to learn all about this. It's crazy. And James decides not even to help me by referring another great realtor to actually do the deal because he's changing his business model. So this basically opened the door to the first condo is running, the money is coming in, it's cash flowing, and I was like, great. this seems like I should do more of this, right? And usually that's for me how it goes. It became the passion. And I, between meeting James and, the rest of 2013, I probably read more than I've ever read, because I don't read very fast. But I read every book I could get my hands on. I borrowed courses from James, spilled water on one of them. I did copy it over, and he was like, you didn't need to do this. But it's deep dive. And I mean, I don't know if you can comment on that because you saw it from a distance, but
I did, and one of the early things you told me is you got to change your photo because you were watching all my videos and my photo was creeping you out.
That is true. Yeah, and so it was, for me it's deep dive. How do I learn everything as fast as possible so that I can make this even more successful? And then, James and I basically spent the entire year of 2013 together driving around in his car looking at houses to buy. I probably analyzed, 500 plus houses in 2013, and we probably saw 200 to 300 houses in person. So it's not a game of, I saw 3 houses, I made an offer and I got one, right? This was, let's go see 200 to 300 houses to buy 8. Do the math. It's not easy. It's hard work, and that's the thing that people don't see. They're like, oh, he filled all his loan spots, lucky bastard. Well, not really. I mean, it's just a shit ton of work to get it done. So, and I'll just reiterate this. Like, even today, so I have 2 houses under contract right now, and they're really good deals. But I will tell you, there's still that nagging, oh man, is it the right thing to do? It's much easier today, right? I'm not crying on the floor in a corner or anything like that, having a breakdown. But yeah, if you know me and you've ever been to a movie with me, I've cried. So
he cries during commercials.
I do, yes. If it deals with animals, I'm hosed. Yeah, if you ever want to make me cry, just show me an animal commercial. But it's really, I read every article on BiggerPockets that came out in the entire year of 2013, right? And it got to the point where I was like, okay, these are just repeating at some point. But you learn all sorts of stuff, right? Why are these people saying this? Then you read the comments. Why are these people saying that? And I think James and I started, I guess it's down here too, but right, the more that you learn, the more you understand what you don't know. And then you go, I don't know so much more than I thought I didn't know, and then you go learn that. And then you dig deeper and you dig deeper and you dig deeper. And that to me is the process of mastery, right? Realizing that I'm never going to know everything about real estate, right? You guys have asked questions that I can't answer, even about asset protection, which I've spent I think a year of my life trying to figure out. But I don't know it all, right? There's just no way I can. But understanding, hey, I'm at this level, and to get to the next level, I got to learn these things. I think that's really important.
I'll comment on that too. So one of the things that's really frustrating to me is, we'll do a class on how to analyze a deal or something like that, and someone will come to the class once and think, all right, I got it. I know how to analyze deals. I'm done with that. Check it off. I'm never coming back to that thing. And when I'm teaching it, I'm thinking to myself, wow, there's so much here still that I need to learn and so much that I need to understand and refine. So somebody who thinks that they come to the class and learn from me what it is and think that that's good enough, it's very bizarre.
Right. And I think that's why, James and I have talked about this before, but it's why, he has to come to unlock the door. But I don't have to come to James's classes. And maybe barring, cash flow explosion, I really enjoy all the rest of them. I'm kidding. It's mostly just the explosion part that's crazy. But we go to dinner usually after class and we talk about stuff, hey, and it's always this really sparked a thought for me, or I didn't know this, or that's a really interesting way that you presented that because it's different than how I think about it.
And the same
right?
for me. You'll explain something that I could teach most of the classes you're teaching, maybe not asset protection the way you teach it, but most of the stuff, and then you'll say something a way that I've never heard before, and I'll be like, wow, is that really how you believe that works? Because I don't usually describe it that way, and it's different than how I see the world.
Right. So I think the thing is, how do you not get bored coming to, any class that we teach multiple times? And I think the first time you hear something, you learn it. It's like reading Millionaire Real Estate Investor. If you've read it once, great. Read it again a year later. after you've done some work. Read it again a year later after you've acquired more properties. You'll learn stuff every time. So my goal was basically, and I went back and looked. I started teaching in September of 2013. So I think this says something because James doesn't let other people teach.
That's true.
And I started investing. I bought my first property in August of 2012. I drove around the car with a lot for the next, 9 months. But James is like, I don't really feel like teaching, anymore, because he's exactly what he said. He's teaching the same stuff over and over. And I'm like, I'll teach. And, for whatever reason, James was like, okay. And so like for the next 6 months, I taught like every class. Right?
I don't know if it was quite every class, but it seemed like a lot.
The majority of them, because you were just burned out.
And it helps that you were in the car with me so much, and that
Right.
I mean, basically you would say things back to me that I knew you understood at that point. And so
Right.
I felt really, really comfortable with it.
And I think anytime you can teach someone else a topic, it only enhances your learning and your knowledge, right? You realize, I don't actually know that as well as I thought I did.
Yeah, you learn at a different level, a much better
Yes.
level when you have to teach it to someone else.
Yeah. I mean, we had a class that was buying down your interest rates, and, somebody in class basically was like, well, what about this? And James and I are both like, we got to go like rethink that, because we just hadn't thought about it, right? So we learn stuff every single time. So my goal when I started kind of going through this, I was like, hey, if I can get enough houses to just pay my mortgage payment, I'll be living for free, right? That was the thought in my head. And then, when I got there, it was like, hey, let's take all those little bills and get to those. And you don't have to start this way, right? If you start with, hey, I'm going to get all my utility bills paid for, that's fantastic, right? You're living for less than you were. So this was how I thought about it. And then as that got done, it was like, okay, now how far do you want to go? And to answer the question is, when is enough enough? I don't know. I've had this conversation with James, with a mastermind group that I run, and it's a really difficult question. When is enough enough? Like, huh? Well, it's not necessarily that it's not enough, right, to like stop and not have to work. It's more, I really love it, right? And I think that's the difference, is like, even if I had 10 times or 100 times what I have, would I stop? No. Is it because I want the money? No. It's because I enjoy the work, right? I enjoy doing what I do. And I think that's really, to me, the difference. So, and whoever asked why, Brandon, did you ask my why? I mean, for me, the why is I get to stay home with my kids during the summer, right? And they get to hang out with me, most of the days. Most of the time, they're not driving me crazy. But, even when they do, like, I have the opportunity to take them to school and bring them home, right? I have the opportunity to spend time with them during the day. I have the opportunity to go to their school performances, right? Like, that's something that not everyone has. And so for me, it's just the freedom, right? The time, the family, and the freedom. All right. I think we only have 2 slides left, which is pretty good. For me, that's a normal class, like 8:30,
Totally.
So many of you know, I was married, and then I got divorced in 2014. And this was probably, in my career, the biggest setback or failure or whatever, right? And I mean, James saw it firsthand, and there was just a lot of fear, right? I had created this real estate business, and suddenly everything was uncertain. Am I going to have a real estate business? Am I going to have enough income to actually get more loans to be able to continue to buy properties? Is it all just downhill? Am I going to have to go get a normal job? Like, what's going to happen?
And,
right?
and I'll just raise a general point, not specific to Brian, although it probably is specific to Brian, and that is that the emotional side, the personal side, it amplifies all of the business stuff. So if you have any uncertainty about your emotional stuff, the divorce and everything else, it's going to amplify your business decisions and make those seem a lot larger than they are anyway. So I think that was fair that you had those feelings, but I think they were also amplified by just the emotional stuff that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are definitely irrational, right? And I think, in hindsight, looking back, if everything would have been taken away, could I have recreated it? And I think I could have, right? Because once you've done it, right, it's not the fact that you can, who was this, Henry Ford? It's like not the fact that you can like build a car and make lots of money. It's the fact that you learned how to do the process, right? So could you go back and do it? I felt like I could, but not in the moment. In the moment, it was just not good. And then kind of fast forwarding probably about a year, very rarely do I ever kind of like sit down and go, oh yeah, really great job, Brian. Like that's just not I may come across that way to some people, but I don't do it for myself genuinely. And this is one of the few times in real estate where this is the 17-plex that many of you have heard about from the multifamily analysis class. But I basically had to go out, figure out how I was going to have down payment, how I was going to get a loan for this building. And I spent 4 hours on the phone, and I was able, because of all the work, right, that I had put in, was able to raise the $1 million in a matter of 4 hours. And that night I sat down and I went, man, that's crazy. Like I didn't know anything about real estate like 3 years ago, right? And this just happened. And I think that's the only time I've ever really done that in my real estate career.
Yeah, it was super impressive, but I will tell you, there was an immense amount of work to get to the point
Yes.
where it only took 4 hours to do
Yes.
it. And it's like all that work that you spent it's like the overnight success that took 10 years to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, how to cram 10,000 hours of learning into 3 years so that you can make a few phone calls and have stuff work, right? And, part of that's going to be, luck, but it's creating your own luck. Many of you know, and some of you are involved, like I've created other partnerships. And I think, the lesson there, it must be on the last slide. Somebody pointed out, I think it was Beth that pointed out, she's like, in the most recent partnership that you formed, like there was one partner, thought we had all the kind of loan money lined up, and then that fell through, and it was like, not sure where the money's actually going to come from, but they pointed out like you weren't like, oh well, you were just like, I'm just going to go find it somewhere else. So I think that constant just, hey, there's an obstacle, who cares? Go around it, go over it, whatever you need to do to make it happen for yourself to get your business to work.
Did you skip over the step counter thing?
No, it's right here. I just did that.
Oh, that's where it is. Okay.
So James wanted me to put this story in here, more to make you laugh and understand that I am the most competitive person you will ever meet.
I actually don't think that's the reason, although it is a funny story, and I think it is a statement to your competitiveness. I think it's a statement to your grit and like never giving up and going for it all the time.
So James and I both have Fitbits, or he used to have a Fitbit before he got his Apple Watch. Now he's better than Fitbit, I guess. Maybe Apple will give us a donation to the podcast.
Maybe.
So you have little challenges on Fitbit, right? And like you can do the like daily challenge. So we decided we're going to do this daily challenge, right? And you can already imagine it's amped up because it's me and James. And so
it wasn't just me and you either. There was other people involved.
This one was just me and you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The other one was me, you, Tammy, and Beth, and that was. Oh, and were you?
I think Royce was involved.
He wasn't in it.
Jamie was.
Oh, Jamie was.
Oh, yeah. And so we have this challenge. It's a 24-hour challenge. It ends at midnight, right? And like I did a bunch of steps during the day. I like went out and ran. I like got a nice lead, right? And I was thinking, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm good. And from James's side of the story, he looks at that and he's like, it's like 9:30 or 9 at night, and he's like, I'm just gonna go walk 4 laps around the park, overtake Brian. He's probably in bed, and I will.
It wasn't 4 laps around the park. It was my 8-mile normal hike.
So he goes out, he hikes 8 miles, and around, I don't know, must have been like 10:30. I looked at it and saw that he was ahead, and I was like, I started calculating if I could even catch up, and then I was like, you're wasting time. I put my shoes on. It's 10:30 at night, and I kid you not, I'm running through my neighborhood like this for the next hour and a half. And I'm literally watching the phone, and I'm like, I'm not sure I'm gonna make it, but I'm like trying to figure out how to make my steps go faster, like whatever it takes. And I finally get down to where, had I noticed, because when you switch leaders, it actually moves the name. So I had actually taken the lead, but I didn't know it, right? And so I'm looking at it, and it's 11:57, and I'm like 2,000 steps away. And so I'm literally standing in front of my house, sprinting in place as fast as possible, thinking. And for 3 minutes, I held this, and my heart rate was like 185 for 3 minutes on the graph. And I was like, and I finished, and I was actually pissed because I was like, I didn't catch him. And then like I went inside, like 20 minutes later, I looked, and I'm like, oh, I actually won. And he, like, James, you can tell your side of the story.
Well, I went to bed. I mean,
You thought you had it in the bag.
I did. I basically, because I thought you went to get ice cream with the kids. I thought you were
Yep.
like done for the evening. You were watching TV. You
Yeah.
were settled in. I did my like 8-mile hike, and I even did like a couple extra miles just to kind of make sure. I had these rashes on the inside of my leg. I was like, forget this. I'm taking a shower. I'm going to bed. It was like 10:30.
Yep.
And then when I woke up the next morning, it was like I don't know what it was. Probably like a text or screenshot of the thing. You send it over to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're ever ahead of me, never let up.
Yeah.
Like, go till midnight.
That's a grit thing, and I think we see that not just in this. I mean, that's like the trivial example of how you
Crazy.
are even with real estate stuff.
Yes.
And there wasn't a story. We didn't include this story, but one of the properties you bought, I jokingly made $50,000 on it.
Right.
Because I like called him up. I said, hey, listen,
I'm at the bank.
Yeah. He basically made an offer. We knew there were multiple offers, really competitive situation.
No, we got it before. It was the other property manager that was trying to buy it.
Oh, I just thought it was competitive. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm like, hey, listen, they'll accept your offer if you go up 50,000. You're like, yes, accept, go do it. And I'm like, sweet, because they accepted your offer as is. I just made 50 grand. Yeah, but he's like super competitive. Of course, I did not charge him that, but that was the joke. Just to
I was
say.
pretty pissed when he said it, though.
Yeah,
I was like,
because you are like there to win. You
Yeah.
want to win it.
yeah. And I think if you hear me talk about when you're going to make offers, right? Are you just playing the game, or are you playing to win, right? And it's playing to win isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? I'm not playing to make someone else lose, and certainly in negotiations, I'm trying to create a win-win situation. But when I'm trying to get a property, like, we're all competitors, right? And so there are times when, I know Royce and I have written offers on the same property, right? And I'm like, I love Royce, but I'm gonna win, right? Like, that's the mentality, because why else would I play? Like, if you don't really want to buy the property, why bother writing an offer? I don't get it. So, I mean, my competitiveness is a huge turnoff for a lot of people, but you can lead that question, because this was the question we had on the phone. We
Is
were
it
like,
how to decide who to
Yeah.
believe?
Oh, so like James and I will stand up here, like we were talking about, how do you decide who to believe? So during
Mary's interview,
what was she saying?
Mary was basically, I think we were talking about whether or not she should buy another one next year right away or something like that.
Another house,
And I said, let's evaluate it and see like where you are and what the situation is, and evaluate what it is. And you were like very quick to say, ignore James. You should automatically buy another property next year and buy one every year and buy them as quickly as you can. And so how do you know who to believe?
Yeah, and I think you were like, take it slow, blah, blah, blah. And, I'm not a believer in taking it slow, right?
Right.
So,
So who does everyone believe? Like if you've got two people up here that
I
are
thought you were
saying,
going to make them vote.
well, I mean,
We'll put our heads down. Royce can tell us. It'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Do you feel that puts you at higher risk?
So the question is, do you feel it puts you at a higher risk?
No, because I think going fast isn't being irresponsible necessarily, right? If you're going fast and you're cutting everything really thin, I think that's an irresponsible decision, right? Then you should slow down. In Mary's case, it wasn't that. She was just like, I'm coming up on my year, and James is like, you don't necessarily have to buy one, at your year. And I'm like, forget that. Go buy your next house, right? She's happy to move. She's happy. She's got the money to go do the down payment. Why wait? She's nomading, right? It makes no sense in my mind for her to wait so that house prices are higher. And if they go down, that's fine. She's cost averaging every year over time anyway. If she only has $100 in the bank for reserves, then yeah, that's a terrible decision. But if she's got the reserves, then I think math is in her favor, because she's not a short-term investor. She's not trying to time the market. She's trying to hold it forever and use it as retirement.
So here's another kind of question that comes up, and that is, when do you become discouraged when you can't find deals? If you said, hey, listen, every property I want to buy, I want to make $500 a month positive cash flow, net after all expenses, and you go out there and you start looking in the marketplace and you're trying to get these deals and you're making offers where the numbers do work like that, but you are not getting them accepted, when do you become discouraged and do you change your plan?
I mean, I think we changed the plan, right? I mean, I think your class on, the 2 best ways to invest in our current market shows that even we try to change what we teach to plan, right?
So what if you have unrealistic selection criteria for your deals? What if you say, listen, I need to have 5% positive cash flow, which is a number we've discussed for many years when it was possible to do it, and now it's really hard to do 5% cash on cash return. So do you change your selection? Do you decide I'm not investing here? Do you go to another market? How do you kind of interpret that as someone who's seen this?
Yeah, I mean, even when I could get 5% in Fort Collins, I was still like, where can I get more? Like 5% was the minimum bar, and I was like, I went to Greeley, and James is like, what? Like, why do you want to go there? Like, I mean, James was very anti-Greeley. I don't think he is anymore, but
less so.
Yeah, less so. Now that we've showed him some math and graphs on it, he's like, oh, it's okay. But
show me my own graphs to be clear.
No, I did not. But I think you should always be looking at what's coming and how do you change to make yourself successful. And so if you need to go, somebody asked a question about out-of-state investing. I don't invest out of state, but if I did, I would probably go to somewhere I knew, which would probably for me be somewhere in Iowa. It wouldn't be in Eldora because no one was moving to Eldora, right? It's a town of like 2,500 people. But you go and you look at Des Moines in Iowa. Des Moines is an up-and-coming city. They've revamped everything. They're bringing younger generations back to work. They've got good employment. I would go find something that looks similar to here, and then I would try to build a base in that city if it was me. I would not build one in Des Moines and buy one in, somewhere else, New Jersey, and one in Florida and one in Austin. I would center and learn and try and win in that market.
So someone would argue, but you're geographically diversified by investing one in Fort Collins, one in Des Moines, one in New Jersey. How do you kind of think about that?
How do I think about?
Yeah, the idea that you're geographically diversified, that the chance of 3 markets all going down at the same time is low, but, because I hear this argument all the time.
Well, I mean, they all went down in the market. I'm not sure what you're getting at, but I mean, you're diversifying just like you're diversifying from owning 100% of Microsoft stock. Yeah.
You'd prefer to actually do it all in one market and take your chances by knowing that and really doing a great job there rather than having one in one market, one in another, one in
Yeah, I would definitely not do the one-offs. I think that's what my point was. I think I would go pick a different market. I would research many markets and I would pick one and I would go deep.
And then, you basically pick one basket of
So this is the
investments.
quote, right? So in full disclosure, so as I spent money on buying houses in 2013 and beyond, I slowly, sometimes very quickly, pulled all of my money from the stock market. I have nothing invested in the stock market, right? Because I don't believe in the stock market, right? And there was an article today that was like, we might see a 50% crash. Who knows, right? But
In the stock market?
Yeah. You're definitely going to see downturns in the stock market, right? Can I control them? No. Have I been through it? Yes. Did it suck? Yes. Can I control the real estate? Much more so. And so Royce's comment was, put all your eggs in one basket and watch the basket really closely. That doesn't mean be irresponsible and don't have backup food in case those eggs break, but that's really my strategy, right? Is understanding it well enough where I'm comfortable doing that.
So kind of on a related topic about selection criteria, if you have unrealistic selection criteria, where does the difference between being gritty and persistent and saying, I'm going to stick to my plan, I'm going to keep making offers until I find one that works, versus when do you cross over and you become stupid for kind of doing something that doesn't work and doing that repeatedly? I mean, where do you see that line between?
I think it depends on how fast you're trying to invest, right? If you're trying to buy one property a month and you go 6 months without buying a property, and you've been buying one every month and something's changed in the market, you're probably not paying attention, right? If you're trying to buy one a year and 1 year you can get 5% and the next year you look at it and you can only get 4%, then maybe you adjust your criteria, assuming you can say, yeah, the market's changing, I'm going to have to take this or I'm going to have to go to a different market, and you make the trade-off between the two in my mind, right? You don't just blindly say it's 5%, with fully managed and that's the only thing I'm accepting, because we all know stuff is different. And I think the difference to me between adjusting your criteria and blindly adjusting them is if you're trying to take a deal and fit it into your criteria and you're like, oh, insurance probably won't be as much as I think, maintenance will be lower, that's a mistake in my mind. If you're taking your deal and you're like, because there was a deal where it was one of the houses that I bought in 2013 where I looked at it and it didn't meet my bar. I think my bar was actually 6% in Fort Collins, cash on cash. Fully, normal maintenance numbers, me managing it, and I couldn't get it to meet it, right? It was like 5.1%, and I was like, well, it's not good enough, but it turns out the house had been on the market, had been under contract, there were some issues with the owner, and essentially I ended up being able to, I put in an offer where I was gonna get about a $30,000 discount on the house, and so I adjusted my cash on cash because I was getting a discount. And I think those are good reasons, right? Like, understanding, hey, if you're adjusting for an actual reason, that makes sense. If you're adjusting just to fit it in so you can buy something, you're a collector. You're not an investor, right? You're just collecting houses.
All right. Anything else?
Any questions on the real estate stuff? Because the next slide is not real estate.
Oh, really? What is it?
Perfect. So many of you guys know that, and this comes back to opportunity. Many of you guys know I run an Amazon business with Beth. It's basically we sell a bunch of stuff on Amazon. And this is kind of one of those examples where I was doing real estate, somebody mentioned something, and it was like, that can't be real. Like, went and read some stuff. I'm fairly sure Royce is the one that mentioned it to me. And he's like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go do private label products. And I was like, I thought about what he said. I went and did some research, started listening to every podcast I could, the normal like Brian behavior of figure it out, go. Like, how fast can you like learn as much as you need to learn? And then I was like, well, I don't know why you do private label product. There's this other thing where you can just buy stuff and send it in. You can learn all the processes of Amazon, and then you could do private label. And so Beth and I went out and literally scanned a bunch of stuff at stores and found 12 items in 2016. Took us probably like 4 hours to ship it because it was so complicated. Now it's very easy. Put it in a box, sent it to Amazon, and refreshed our screen like every 10 minutes for the next 3 weeks, seeing if anything was gonna sell. And sure enough, like something sells and you're like, I can't believe that sold, right? Like we just made $20 on that one item. This can't be true, right? So a couple other things sell, and at that point it was just full on scanning stores everywhere, every day, as much as possible, trying to find stuff to send into Amazon. And so the next 3 months of this basically are making lots and lots and lots and lots of mistakes.
Are you talking
right?
about scanning things that are on discount or clearance?
Nope, just regular products.
So the question was whether you're scanning things on discount or clearance.
Nope, just regular products. So you can walk into any Target, Walmart, pretty much any store you can imagine. King Soopers on any day of the week. Take your phone, walk down the aisle, scan the barcode, and you will find things that people will pay more on Amazon for than they cost in the store. And even with Amazon fees, you can make money on them. And there are hundreds of thousands of people doing this.
So let me kind of be the skeptical person and say to you, so if hypothetically we just assume that you're able to generate enough income from real estate investments, why would you go start a side Amazon business or something like that?
It was one of those things where it was like, this seems too good, too easy, right? And it was just like, it was one of the things where I just decided, hey, I have passion around this. I'm going to go and figure it out. Right?
So why not do more real estate? Why start an Amazon business?
I was still doing real estate.
Okay, so you had like your real estate there. You'd occasionally buy another house or whatever you're doing, but you did this for, was it for the extra money?
I mean, some of it's like, hey, if I can make extra money, I can pay houses off faster, or I could use it to buy more houses. I mean, at some point, even if you have some chunk of money to start with, right? If you buy a number of houses, you no longer have a chunk of money to buy more houses with. You need to find more money.
So this was a really interesting discussion we had this morning or yesterday. So the thought is, let's say you started with $1 million, but eventually you use all that for down payments to buy houses, you are at zero again. Right. So if somebody is here is like, hey, listen, I'm at zero, I don't have money to invest. The people that have money to invest, once they've invested their money, they are where you are. They're at zero. So they have to come up with new ways to invest or be creative or do other things. And if you're living off of the cash flow your properties are generating, it's not like you have all this excess cash flow to go and invest. You're literally living off that money like you would a job. So just like you have a job and you're bringing in $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month, the money that people that are living off their real estate investments have, they're using that to live on. And if they have excess, sure, they're saving that, but it's just like you. It's just like income from a job where you're trying to do that.
Yep. And so in that summer of 2016, we bought a whole bunch of stuff that looked really good, and it ended up not being really good, and we learned all about the business. We learned, you want this rank, you want to sell through very quickly, you don't want to hold inventory. And by about August or September, we really had dialed in a strategy of this is the only ranks we will buy in whatever category, and how many of those can we find? And we found lists of leads that we could buy online, and then you source those every day, and then it just evolves. And as you go through it, and Royce does this too, but it's really, and other people in the room actually do it too. I think there's like 7 offshoots in NCREG that have started Amazon businesses from hearing about it, and you guys can all go do it too.
Not James.
Not James. James claims to have started one, but he doesn't. And so I think it's, you dial in the strategy and then you just continue to go. And for me, it's a lot of fun, right? Because it's the challenge of finding the deal, right? It's very similar to, being competitive or finding a house and making it work. And so, unlike, I won't share, direct numbers from real estate, but I don't have any problem sharing these numbers. In 2016, from basically May 1st to the end of the year, we did $250,000 in sales, which was mind-boggling.
That's not profit. That's gross
That's not
sales.
profit. That's gross sales. That's just revenue, right? Gross revenue before any expenses and before anything is taken out. And in 2017, the goal was to ramp it up and hit $1 million. Unfortunately, I spent about 2 months buying real estate, and so I got a little defocused. And we ended up doing just under $820,000 in gross sales, which ended up being about $140,000 in profit. And what's awesome about that is when I went to get, First Bank had basically said, we can't loan you any more money. Your debt service coverage ratio is just not quite high enough, blah, blah, blah. And when I called them this time, they were essentially like, yeah, that company you started, yeah, it's easy now. And so there it is, right? There's the reward. It took a year and a half, and now I can get at least another loan or two at First Bank without a problem and go buy more real estate, which it's just the ball starts rolling down the hill, and hopefully it keeps rolling faster.
Yeah, the first few houses you buy are usually pretty easy. The more you have, the harder it becomes to buy more houses. So the problems you have as a beginner, those are the easy problems to solve. And I know that sounds weird to hear when you're kind of doing it, but the ones you get later on when you start having a portfolio and it becomes more challenging to do stuff, those are the harder ones to do.
Yeah, and I think, Royce should chime in here because he hasn't said anything too, but like the excitement of doing it and having others around you that are doing it and like, oh, I found this. And Royce and I at Christmas time, because Q4 is obviously a very big time, Royce and I at 10 o'clock, it'd be like, want to go shopping? And he'd be like, yeah. And we'd go hit like 3 Targets and 3 Walmarts until 2 a.m. in the morning. And we're like the only 2 in the store, carting big baskets of like LOL balls and other things through the store and like buying 20 of everything. And,
We've actually talked about teaching that class. This is why, by the way, I don't start an Amazon business, because if I go to Walmart at 12 o'clock at night, the staff follows me around.
So to be clear, so one thing, if you were like, hey, I really needed to leave at 8 and you need to leave, feel free to leave. It won't offend me at all. Or if you're just bored out of your mind, feel free to leave. That's fine too. But when James walks into a store with me, when I'm showing him what's going on, what he does is he walks by the security guard and he actually says, we're not here to steal anything. Don't worry about us. Guess who follows you around for the next hour? If you've ever been in a Walmart at 12 o'clock at night with 2 guys walking through like the electronics aisles, like the Walmart employees are like, beep, beep, beep. And you go to the next aisle and they're like, I'm like, what is going on? It's really creepy. So. No. No, he does not do that.
Yeah, you add that on top of having, multiple shopping carts that you're dragging around the store, and they're like, they're stealing stuff. They're definitely stealing stuff. And then you show up and they're like, why do you have these 3-year-old like girls' toys and this set of this? And you're just like,
Yeah, and so, you know, we don't tend to sell this, but, you know, one very profitable item is women's bras. And so you can imagine if Royce and I ever decide to source that, that's going to look really odd, right? Like just every bra off the rack, scanning it. So, yeah.
Irregardless of size, just scanning all of them.
Turns out, though, very large sizes sell much better. So there's all sorts of stuff you learn. I mean, it's insane what you learn. And it's, you know, part of it is just learning to run any business, right? And so once you run one business, doing this is not that hard, right? You just have to understand how that business works, and then you too can go do it. And I could care less if you, you know, you're like, this is great, I would never do that. There is so much unbelievable opportunity, whether it's in this space or any other side hustle space, right? It's just crazy. Even in this space, I mean, Royce and I are like, if we had 30 employees, we could keep them all busy, right? Because it's just like, I could go start a, you know, YouTube group. I already have a Facebook group that has leads where everyone contributes every week. I could go and take VAs and source my own leads and charge people to buy those leads. Like, there's just an unbelievable amount of opportunity. You could go and do wholesale. You could go do private label product. You can do whatever you're passionate about and make it work, not just in Amazon, but in whatever field you're looking to do. So if you only take one thing, this is on the next slide, but like, opportunity is everywhere. If you're discouraged because you can't find deals, don't be. There's opportunity. Just don't be narrow focused. Think about where else you could actually find the opportunity in what you're trying to do, right? Lots of people come to class and say, I'm going to wholesale deals. Fantastic. It's really difficult in our market. So do you need to move to a different city? Maybe. Or can you change your tune to do Nomad? I mean, I think Mary showed up and was going to do wholesale, right? And it was like, why would you do that? And we sat down and talked with her, and she was like, well, I'm going to do Nomad, and now look where she's at, right? I don't think she regrets that. And if she wanted to go do Amazon, she could totally go do that. If she wanted to go build a, you know, blogging business online, she could totally go do that. So whatever it is you want to do, the opportunity is there. Don't let anyone tell you it's not.
And I'll kind of the theme that comes back to what made Brian successful is that grit and consistency as well. And that's one thing that I noticed. My business has grown much slower than Brian's. We've taken different paths to get there. And the biggest difference in the first year that I was in it versus Brian was Brian showed up every single day. Like you'll pay for like these leads lists, or you'll have, you know, these opportunities that come up. And Brian he doesn't miss days. It's just period. He's going to do that work, and that is it. And there's no question about it.
Yeah.
And he did, you know, on his own, you know, crushed what I did. We came from 2 different points, and I put a lot more tools and stuff like that in place. And Brian just ran right at the wall and just kept going. And that's amazing to see. And, you know, it's taken me a couple years now. I'm 2 years into it, and I'm finally getting to where he's at. And it's a very different approach, but it's that constant
And 2 years from
ability
now,
to set up.
he's going to be so far in front of me. So, and that's okay, right? And I think, you know, just like I spend time helping people in NCREG, I do the same thing for Amazon, right? I didn't get paid. I was actually paying to be in a group, and I spent time making videos teaching other people how to do it. And then eventually the guy was like, hey, do you want to just like have the list for free and continue to generate that content? And I was like, sure. And then, you know, over time things change, and so now I have my own group where that's kind of happening, and I'd like to grow it bigger. But it's when you give back, you get more, right? And I think that's the other key takeaway from, you know, my experience of sitting up here and trying to teach class and help you guys. It happens everywhere. You give back, and you get a lot more from that. You can ask a question? All right. And then, you know, don't be afraid to invest in yourself. So, you know, or your kids. So my son Aiden basically has his own Amazon business. He sells it through my account. He won a bet with me, which he should not have won, but he won it. I mean, if anything, I'm a very fair person, right? So I gave him 4 years to win the bet. It took him 2 weeks. I basically said, it's a made-up basketball game that I taught him. It's called Good Faith. It's a really stupid game. If you saw us playing it, you would think we were on drugs. Because like the ball bounces, you have to be in the air when you grab the ball, and you have to shoot it before you hit the ground. And you get points depending on how many times it bounced. Crazy game my friend Bob and I made up back at Microsoft. It's a lot of fun to play. So I taught him this game, and I'm like, if you beat me before you're 14, I'll give you $100. And he was like, seriously? And I'm like, yeah, because I'm like, Bob, I don't think Bob ever beat me in this game. And I'm like, there's not a chance you're going to beat me. And so like I would kind of play a little bit, loose. And then, he'd start putting it on, and I'd like put on some heat and score enough points, and he'd play to 21. And one day we're playing, and he's just draining shots he shouldn't be making. I mean, and it was just, he was like, we played at 21, and he was ahead like, 16 to 15. And so I'm trying, I miss my shot, and he like sinks a 3-pointer. And I'm like, okay, right? And then he sinks another one, and they only were 2 points. And then he hits his last shot just on some crazy shot, and he immediately knows he's won. And we're at the park, Fossil Ridge, is that what it's called by your house? Fossil Creek Park. And I'm pretty sure everybody in the park stopped because he just immediately dropped the ball and started screaming and running this giant lap around the park. I won $100! I won $100! I won $100! Like, I'm like, wow. And so I was like, fantastic. I'm like, what are you gonna do with it? And he's like, well, I'm gonna spend some of it. I'm like, well, I'm closing on a small apartment building at the end of the week. Do you want to take your $100 and invest in it with me? And he'd been to the apartment, he'd seen it, he knows what it looks like. And he's kind of like, no. And I'm like, and so like, I'm like heartbroken, right? I'm like, oh man, you're killing me. Like, I'm like, why? I'm like, tell you what, you pick any property that I own and we can just have you invest in that. So if you don't like that one because it's a little more, run down, it's not like a, what he would consider a nice house. I'm like, and he's like, no. And I'm like, oh man. And then he asks, I think, what is the best question I've ever heard him ask, because it was so thoughtful. He was like, can I invest in Amazon with you instead? And I was like, winner. I was like, yeah. And so he spent $10 of his $100. He took his $90 and he could buy inventory. So he had to learn the business. He had to learn how to understand rank. So I taught him this stuff, and he caught on very quickly. And so he goes out, he took his $90, and basically through that summer, which was last summer, and he did a little bit during the school year, but summer is like the hardcore time. He turned his $90 into $1,250. And so he's doing it again this summer, much more hardcore. But now he just walks into Target. He'll take, even when I'm not with him, mom goes with him, he'll take a cart, he'll go to the toy section, and he'll come back, be like a cart full of toys, and buy them and send them in. And so he understands the business, and he's doing it all himself, and he's 11, right? So, teach your kids this stuff, right? Like, get them involved, and like the fun and enjoyment that, now it's like, I'll never stop doing this, right? Because it's awesome to go out with him, and he's like, I think this is good. I'm like, well, if you think it's good, decide whether you're gonna buy it, right? And he loses money on some products, which he gets discouraged about, but I'm like, that's not the game, right? The game is, can you sell more products that you make money on than you lose money on? And then, he'll see one where he makes $20 instead of loses, 73 cents. And he's like, oh, that easily just made up for all the ones that I lost money. I'm like, and that's the game, right? And then he gets excited, but he wants to go every day. Like, if you want to stand at Target, you'll probably see us, pick a Target, you'll see us at least 2 or 3 times a week because he wants to go. So, and I think you already asked this, right?
I did cover that one.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is, the other answer to this question is, like, I enjoy the work, right? I enjoy learning. So, yeah. Any questions on Amazon? It's called FBA. It's called Fulfillment by Amazon if you want to go look it up. There's lots of podcasts. You can talk to Royce or I don't know. Does anyone else here run an FBA business? Oh, yes. I'm like, I know, like, I'm looking for, like, there's like 7 other people who have started FBA businesses.
I know somebody that was like half my day.
He says, don't tell my boss, it's half my day. Oh, don't put that on the mic?
I know somebody who was buying truckloads of stuff. You
Yep.
don't know what's in it.
Yeah.
You pay like a flat fee, and then you pay to have it delivered.
Yeah.
And they started going through the numbers on it after they got them, and I was like shooting holes in like, well, you're doing this and this wrong.
Yeah.
Your profits are going right out the window in these weird little ways.
Yeah.
And I think it helped him pointing out some of those things, but
Yep.
Yeah.
That is not my preferred method because a lot of it, all the stuff that we sell is new. And so a lot of the stuff that comes on the truckload is generally shelf pulls from stores or returns, and they've got small damage. And so if you send stuff in and you buy something on Amazon and it's got a dent in the box, like, you're not happy. So, so this are my final thoughts, and then I'll try and answer those questions if I didn't get them already, and we have time. So we all have failures. Like when James asked me this, he's like, what have been your failures? Like, it's really hard for me, and maybe it's naive, but like I look back and I mean, there's a couple spots where I'm like, that was a huge setback, but I'm never like, man, I really totally botched that. Like, I just totally failed. And part of me then wonders if I'm taking big enough bets, right? Because you hear, oh, you should be making big bets, and if you're not failing, then your bets aren't big enough. So it's a constant struggle. I struggle with that personally. Like, should I be failing more? For me, when you find something you get excited and passionate about, double down, learn everything you can, and go. I have spent 1 year, my last year at Microsoft, I was in a group that I didn't really enjoy with a manager who was all about himself and not a team player. Unbelievable stories, but it was hard to go to work. I didn't love my job, right? And I've been super fortunate that I love what I do. And so when you find the thing that you love, go do it.
And Brian is not chasing around, all these shiny objects. He basically finds one thing and then focuses on that. He's not going and trying like 9 different things.
And the thing is, I've tried this. I tried for the entire year. I'm like, what is my next thing that I can get passionate about, right? And I would like pick something and I would try to get some passion, and I'm just like, this doesn't work. And so I've learned, when that thing shows up, when Royce says, hey, there's this Amazon FBA thing, and I go learn about it, and I'm like, I need to learn more. I'm like, okay, just forget everything else for now. We're going to go do this until it's working. Don't waste time on things you don't care about, right? That's how you become great. The team and people around you matter. So we talked about this, right? Like, true support from my family and friends, that means everything to me, right? If James was like, oh, don't put all your eggs in one basket, I mean, he'd still say that even if he didn't believe it because he's my realtor, but, he wouldn't say that. I'm kidding. And have peers that are going to pressure you. So, I rode Royce during the first year. I'm like, why don't you just scale your Amazon business up? Like, go. Like, stop putzing around. Let's just go. Like, you could be doing this too, right? And, that peer pressure and the kind of build, and it's like, hey, did you do this? I mean, Royce is like, yeah, how do you not have a repricer set up yet, like on your business? And I'm like, because I'm an idiot. That's why, right? So have friends that are going to hold you accountable. Have family that's going to hold you accountable. This addresses the mentorship question that's on here somewhere, which is, I believe in partnership a lot more than mentorship. I didn't go to James and say, can you be my mentor and teach me everything about real estate? And if you've ever been unfortunate to ask me that after class, you probably got a really weird look like, you don't need a mentor, you need to go spend time learning, right? And then you need to come back with something that you can give to the relationship that helps you become a partner with that person. So mentors can be great. I've had great teachers, but even my manager who at Microsoft we moved up together, he would never give me an inch, right? Because I would take it, that's what he thought, right? And then take more. But at the end, when I finally left, the most powerful thing he said to me was, I think I learned more from you than you learned from me. And then he gave me the mile, right? Like on the way out the door. I'm like, dude, like, you couldn't have told me that earlier? Like come on. But I think that's, if you're trying to give more to someone you want to learn from, what are you taking to them? And then you'll get everything and more. It's right. It's the more you give, the more you're going to get back. So spend time building partnerships. Stop thinking, oh, I need 7 mentors. Like, you just probably don't. And this is kind of the, you see Michael Jordan take a final shot and make the basket, and you don't see him shooting 1,000 free throws every day or 1,000 three-pointers every day for 10 years, right? There is so much time and effort and hard work. Like, I'm up last night until 11. The night before that, it was after midnight. What am I working on? Amazon stuff, real estate stuff, right? I spend time with my family, they go to bed, and I work, right? You may not want to do that, but that is what generates where I'm at. It's not, oh, I did it for an hour a day. I put everything I had into it. So
I'd say I'm up till 12 o'clock doing stuff, but really Tammy's up till like 2 o'clock doing all the work for the real estate stuff too.
yeah, and then this is probably the biggest point, because if you don't have down payment money or you're trying to invest and you're like, oh, I just wish I had an extra, you look at James's calculator and it's like an extra $160 a month, from this cash flow in a year generates enough for a down payment or whatever it is. Like, you can totally go generate that yourself very easily. Like, next month you can go do that. I mean, go get motivated and whatever it takes for you. But opportunity is there, so don't miss out. There's just a lot of opportunity. It's unbelievable. And I think it's taken me a long time to see that, but now it seems so clear. Like, I could spend 24 hours a day and still not even come close to all the things that I could get done. So that was my last slide. I'll see if I covered your questions. Out of state I covered. Mentors I covered. I covered my why. Transition to property manager, who asked that one? What's the question again? Good thing I wrote notes.
When did you transition to property managers, or when would you?
So I managed all the single family homes and duplexes that I had for several years, 1, 2, 3, 4 years maybe. And then I just decided, you know what, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take the calls. And I looked at it and I went, I'm okay with basically giving up the 10% property management fee. So let's turn it over. And there was definitely a 9-month struggle of, getting them leased, the complication of my lease to their lease, and but now it's very smooth, right? So.
Is that money well spent?
The question was, is that money well spent?
For me, it is, because I can spend my time doing other things and make more money than having to go do that, and it's not work I want to do, right? So this is the same thing as like, in the Amazon business, when you buy all the product yourself, you bring it home and you need to pack it up and you need to ship it to Amazon so that you can sell it. This work sucks. It is tedious, it is boring, and it is not in any way helping you long term, right? If you hired someone to do that or just sent it to a prep center, now you're spending money, but you're saving all this time, right? We can't get our time back. We can only use the time we have. So I would rather pay a property manager 10% and manage them and go build a business, right? And when that's done, automate it, make it very easy, and then build some other business. Who knows what's next, right? So yes.
If you could hire someone for $10 or $12 or $15 an hour to do a job, and you choose not to hire somebody but do it yourself, you are voluntarily paying yourself $10, $12, $15 an hour.
Why real estate investing versus other? I think I covered that. I mean, it's really a matter of passion falling into my lap. And I just took advantage of it. 1, 2, 4 unit or straight to 20 units. You can go either way, right? I think if you're gonna self-manage and you really want to learn and understand, it might be much easier to buy a single-family home and then a duplex and manage that yourself, and then understand, okay, it's gonna be 20 of these. How am I gonna deal with it? But there's also the mindset of, you know what? If you want to go buy 100-unit apartment complex, that may be all you need. So do you know how to manage it? Do you know how to get the partners to do it, right? Go get involved with the people and whichever path makes sense to you. So I don't think there's a right or wrong way.
And if you're thinking that you're going to go to 20 because cash flow is going to be better, that has not been true in our marketplace. And the people that are buying the larger units, they're finding they're not generating cash flow right away, that it's taken some time to do it. And you're having to fund 20 units of properties for a period of time while you're improving cash flow.
Off-market deals, I find them through James, because I've never actually sent postcards myself, but he sent a lot of postcards and I bought some of those deals. What was the scaling and mindset one? Who asked this? It must have been early. Oh, geez, you asked that? What's the question?
Oh, he pretty much just went to straight scale for what I think most everyone in this room would consider scale. So, but I guess what took you from 6 to 10 properties to more, right? What made you have that confidence? And then, was it expected value type thing, taking the bets? Like what really led to that confidence?
I am probably just overly confident in myself, honestly. Like, I looked at doing the condo and I was like, okay, well, that's making a couple $100 every month after everything. And then I was like, well, this lease option thing is amazing. And I was like, I started looking at just regular houses. I'm like, how can I get more of these and quickly, because it seems to make sense. And so it was probably that, in fact, it was the next purchase. I actually put one under contract, and then I put another one under contract before that one closed. And so it was like ramp, right? And I was being super picky about the houses in 2013, right? They were all about $225,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in Fort Collins. I should have bought as many as possible.
Agreed.
Right? And I'm like, well, I don't really like this kitchen. Like, the layout's not so great in this one. I didn't really care about paint colors and that stuff, but I was thinking that way. I'm like, I don't really know if I want this exact neighborhood. And so we looked at tons of houses. But yeah, I don't know that there was I've always been, confident and probably overconfident in many places that sometimes gets me in trouble. It definitely did at Microsoft. If I start over now, what would I do? Build the business. Who asked this? Oh yeah. I mean, I would do the same thing and I would make it work, right? Whether that's buy fewer houses or go buy multifamily or go do off market or lease options only for figure out whatever it was that I needed to do. But I don't know that it would, I might go to Iowa, right? Honestly, I might just go buy in Des Moines or a market that I think is similar to what we've seen here and try and capitalize on that as long as there's good cash flow, right? I wouldn't do speculation in most cases.
What do you think is good cash flow for one?
The question is, what do you think is good cash flow?
I struggle with that a lot.
For where?
He struggles with that a lot.
Why don't you just give him
Do you want the mic?
cash flow like in Fort Collins? Or like in northern Colorado?
I guess just return on your investment.
Well, so that's a different question to me. Like the return on the investment, I am typically in the, for buying a single family home, when I bought them, it's much closer to, overall 40% after everything fully managed. But if you look at James's, 4 quadrants, right, depending on what you're putting down, you're probably getting, a 30-year loan, so there's a 5% return on your investment there. You've got taxes,
15.
Which is 15. You've got your loan pay down, which I just talked about, which is 5, and then you've got your cash flow, which even if it's 0, you've got appreciation, which you're probably a multiple of 5 if you're putting 20% down. Even if it's 3, there's 15. So I mean, you're close to 35 or 40 without cash flow, right? So it really depends on why you're investing. Are you investing so that you can quit your job? You need cash flow, right? If you're investing for retirement, maybe you don't need cash flow, right? And at some point, you're going to have cash flow because your loan is constant, and rents are eventually going to go up over time, right? Because inflation is going to happen. So, why NCRAG I covered. Biggest challenge starting off. Honestly, it was the fear of pulling money out of the stock market in large down payment chunks to go buy houses and thinking, because I grew up thinking, oh, have this big pile of money and then you can retire, right? Which is just garbage, right? Like in my mind, it's like now I'm like, the more income you have every month, wow, that's so much easier. You're never going to run out of money because there's no end to the money, right? Like you don't want to die before you want to die with money left. You don't want to have to be like, oh, I'm going to run out of money. I need to die now. Like that's not a good place to be. So, little delayed comedy there for you. Daily routines. I think Royce, summed this up. Every day. Do it every day. Do something related to your business every day, and do it a lot every day, right? The more you do every day, I spend at least an hour sourcing products for Amazon every single day, right? It's the same as with kids. I spend at least time with my kids almost every day. Wednesday is like when they're in school. Wednesday is usually the day when I take them to school, and then I don't see them till Thursday morning. But other than that, put in the time and the effort. I think the daily routine, whatever it is you need to do. If you're sourcing product for 4 hours in the morning, Nick, then that's awesome. If you're not, perfect. Don't tell your boss where this podcast is. And then the last one is overstretched, and what did I learn? There was a point where I had opportunity with properties, and I looked at the accounts, like I said yes to the properties, I put them under contract, and then I was like, wow, things are really thin. Like, let's hope we don't have any big expenses for like a couple months because all the accounts are really as low as they've ever been. This feels really uncomfortable. And it took about 6 to 9 months before it kind of everything built back up to where it was like, okay, I feel okay now. And it was a risk well worth taking, but you know, things could have gone horribly wrong, and you know, I would have been able to recover, but it wouldn't have been pretty. So, you know, I think it's make sure you've got reserves and, you know, take the risks when the opportunity is there, especially if you're, you know, if you're young, right? I mean, if you're in your, you know, I look at Royce and I'm like, if I only knew what I know today at Royce's age, like, oh my gosh, like, is just incredible, right? So, like, if you're young and you like lose everything and you're 28, who cares? I mean, it sucks. Yes, it's going to be horrible, but really, who cares? Like, there's a lot of time left. You lose everything when you're 75, that's very different. So, you know, take those risks when you can take them. And even, you know, hey, I've got, you know, my financial planner when I was at Microsoft used to basically be like, hey, you know, if you want to like take some subset and like put it in something that's, you know, more risky, that's fine. We don't recommend it, right? And they wouldn't even recommend doing real estate. And I'm like, why are you not telling your other clients about this? Like, it's making way more than you're making me. And she's like, most of the people aren't willing to do the work. And I think that's the answer. So if you're willing to do the work, I think, you know, you can find whatever you need to find. Any other questions? Silence.
Well, I really appreciate you coming and
Yeah, you're
sharing
welcome.
and kind of revealing some of this stuff and insight and a lot of private, sensitive information, in my opinion. So thanks again for coming out, everybody.
Cool.
And if you want to stick around for the very short class after the class, please do. Thank you.